I've completed the ecology of Kanto through Unova, and now I've made it to Kalos, home of the Mega Pokemon! I've spent days waiting on every route, watching Pokemon, almost drowning in the water routes as I swam deep into those waters, even nearly being eaten alive by some of them. And after spending thousands of dollars luring in Pokemon with French bread, studying their habits, and finding out their diet, I can finally bring to you the complete Kalos ecosystem! Howdy there, I'm Kulik, and admittedly it's been some time since our last ecology video, so let's quickly go over our guidelines. First, we will only be considering naturally occurring encounters. This means Pokemon such as Malamar, who is not found on a single route throughout Kalos in a wild encounter, will not be discussed here. After all, we want these routes as naturally as we would find them without human interaction. Ecology is the interaction between animals and their environments and each other, or in this case, Pokemon, each other, and their environment. This also means we will not be discussing encounters within the cities themselves or man-made structures, though there will be some exceptions, of course, such as the Lost Hotel, which has been taken over by wild Pokemon after its abandonment. Speaking of wild Pokemon, there are a number of different ways that we can encounter Pokemon. Grass, flowers, surfing, fishing, you name it. So to simplify this, we will only consider Pokemon encountered within a specific level range that matches the grass encounters. For example, on Route 8, the highest level Pokemon in the grass is level 15. Meanwhile, in the water, there are Pokemon, thanks to the Good and Super Rod, that reach level 25 and beyond. So they will not be discussed on that route, and yes, that means there will be some Pokemon left out. Ultimately, by keeping them in, it would make things more complicated and actually mess with the naturally occurring ecosystem, believe it or not. I originally also wasn't going to include Horde encounters as they were rarer encounters, but then I realized certain key Pokemon would have then been left out of the food chain, such as Wingull, who are only encountered in Horde encounters. Plus, Horde encounters lets us know if there are dens of babies nearby, which is huge for some of our species. From here, our encounter rates will be combined for both X and Y, and will be our general guideline for how many Pokemon there might be in a certain area. We'll also discuss the geography of each section of Kalos as we get into it, meaning we get to start with Central Kalos. Central Kalos is located in the centric and southern parts of the region. The area is dominated by large forested plains with multiple rivers crossing it, with very few changes in elevation. Several towns are surrounded by walls of some sort, and there are also many old castles and chateaus. Many important human settlements and landmarks are located here, such as Vanderbilt Town, Santaloon City, and a portion of Lumio City and Parfum Palace. Finally, as I reveal Pokemon, if I have talked about them in past editions of this, I will only recap their info rather than fully reanalyze them. For new Pokemon, we'll talk about them as we come across them, and only use their inspirations as necessary in order to find their diet, preferring to look at their evolutions first. And at the end of major areas, I will paint you a nice picture with my words to really show you how the ecosystem works in motion, just for the ones that can be really fun to paint that picture for. So, without much further ado, let's begin with Route 1, a small and quiet country lane that connects Vanderbilt Town and Aqua Core Town, and is the only first route in all of Pokemon so far, at least, that does not have a wild encounter. Off to a great start, aren't we? So why don't we move on to Route 2. You'll find many Pokemon hiding among the tall grass that grows in tufts along this trail. Caterpie and Weedle are here in low numbers, inching their way through the grass and eating whatever grass, leaves, and other vegetables that they can get their little mouths around. Unfortunately for them, though, they have a number of different predators here. Pidgey, who are eating our insect Pokemon, and some small mammals such as mice, so Rattata would be on there if it was in this region. Zigzagoon, which are going to be opportunistic omnivores, pretty much eating any small mammal, bug, or anything else that they can really understandably or realistically hunt down. And then we can get into our new Pokemon of Kalos, starting with Fletchling. Fletchling is said to be very friendly and is well known for its beautiful songs, which are in fact sounds of warning. I've made the joke before, but again, beautiful songs we're having today. Just screaming at the top of their lungs. Absolute chaos happening in the Pokemon world. I love mornings in Kalos. It communicates by using chirps and moving its tail feathers to signal others of its kind. In spite of its typically peaceful disposition, it is relentless in battle and very territorial, attacking perceived threats mercilessly. Its body is warm and doubles in temperature when startled or excited. This increase in temperature spikes hormone production in its body. Wonder if, when we think of hormone production, that could either be developmental hormones or that could also be hormones for mating, for that matter. I'm very curious as to which one it is, or it could be a mix for all we know. We probably won't find out because we can't do a biological actual study on them. It can burn someone if they touch it with their bare hands when it is in this state. Fletchling live in both rural and urban areas and once had massive territorial fights with Squawkabilly in the Paldea region, so no direct diet is stated. Again, it's always important to look at the Pokédex info since there are Pokemon that do not follow the same diet as their real-life counterparts, such as Gloom eating bugs despite being based on the Rafflesia flower. So when we look at Fletchinder has a flame sack in its belly. It hunts by igniting tall grass and swooping down on bug Pokemon that attempt to escape the blaze. Once captured, the prey is cooked before being consumed. As its internal fire gradually heats up, it can fly at increasingly faster speeds. It is aggressive and territorial, even against its own kind. It often fights with its own kind for the right to feeding grounds. Its territory range has a radius of over 1 mile or around 2 to 3 kilometers. So, at least when we look at its evolution, we can get confirmation that at least it is eating bug-type Pokemon. But let's also just double down and look at real-life information on robins for the diet here. According to Woodland Trust, robins feed on insects, especially beetles and worms. You might notice one following you about as you dig up your garden, hoping to nab a few worms as you unearth them. Robins can also eat fruit, seeds, crushed peanuts, sunflower hearts, and raisins. They particularly enjoy mealworms. So yeah, that actually matches up with not only real-life robins, but our evolutions here. Of course, we don't know what its final form is gonna do because we don't really have that here, but everything actually matches up and isn't astray from each other in terms of fantasy and reality. We can then easily assume that our fletchling is going after any insect that is going to be smaller than it. That would help explain its higher population in this area. Though as something that you should note, very important actually, this is not a rule that we can use in real life, as typically there are going to be more predators than prey. Otherwise, the predator population would fall because there's just not enough food. What this means is that the bug Pokemon are hiding away as our fletchling hunts for them on this route. If ever it can't find a bug, then it'll supplement itself with seeds and berries. After all, any animal will eat anything if they can't find food and they are hungry enough. We have 2 more new Pokemon to discuss here that are found just as often as our Robin friend, with the next one actually being Bunnelby. Bunnelby's hand-like ears are strong enough to shovel dirt and chop tree roots. It can dig a nest up to 33 feet in just one night. Bunnelby is very sensitive when it comes to danger. Corviknight is a natural predator of Bunnelby. Should it hear Corviknight's flapping, it will quickly dig a hole to hide underground. Well, luckily Corviknight is not here. Also, another one that doesn't state its diet, though, it is a rabbit, which primarily feed on grasses and flowers. What's also nice is that it doesn't have any natural predators here, and any holes that it digs and abandons is perfect for Pokemon seeking shelter like our bugs, which in turn could provide our Robin fletchling to actually find bugs a little easier by looking for where those holes were. Our other Pokemon is Scatterbug, who eats various types of plants, including poisonous leaves and roots. The poison it ingests is processed and turned into a black powder that it scatters all over its body. This powder causes paralysis on contact and allows Scatterbug to deter bird Pokemon from attacking. The powder also regulates Scatterbug's temperature, allowing it to adapt to any climate. Grafaiai in Paldea is a natural predator of it. Amazing. So, just like that, we can actually explain why Scatterbug has such a high population here, despite both Pidgey and Fletchling being present, because those birds are being deterred by the poisonous powder on Scatterbug's body. And we got its diet as well. Great start. Fantastic start. Scatterbug going up on my list. Fantastic kid. So with that, we can actually paint a little bit of a picture to give you a taste of what that's like. As the sun rises on a new day, dew glistening in the morning light, Caterpie and Weedle separately eat their fill of vegetation. While Caterpie blends in with the greenery, Weedle sticks out a little bit more. But that's of no consequence when you have a giant horn at the top of your head. Though unfortunately for them, their predators have learned methods of getting around this. The Zigzagoon making sudden rapid turns as they rush down a Weedle, unable to keep up with its zigzag movements. A Pidgey may swoop in and strike at a Caterpie, and a Fletchling may bounce along the ground to catch another Caterpie off guard as it bounces away. From shrubbery nearby, a Bunnelby watches without fear, enjoying a few dandelions and daisies in this rout of peace for it, for there are no predators to take advantage of its peaceful nature. As the day goes on, a Scatterbug crawls about. While it may camouflage well with the night, it may decide to leave the darkness behind, or even the eve of the shade of trees in order to get its own fill of plants. It luckily can consume the many different poisonous leaves that other Pokemon avoid, allowing it to also cover its body in a black powder, as it does not have to compete with other Pokemon for food. And of course, when one of our birds attempt to strike it, the powder coats their beaks, dusting their body, and absorbs into them, causing the birds to become paralyzed long enough to allow Scatterbug to escape. Though, there's always the chance that a Scatterbug hasn't had enough poisonous vegetation to eat, resulting in not being coated in enough powder and being eaten itself. So, as we close out our first route, I do want to say thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure that you subscribe, share this video and channel with others, as I do want to see this channel grow and I love doing this, and you can even become a member for $3 a month or more if you so decide, allowing you to get a number of different perks, emotes, behind the scenes content updates, and get your name not only in the credits, but shouted out on the end of every video. But, as always, once again, thank you so much for watching, and back to the video. Santalune Forest. I don't know why I said that with the Spanish accent, but the gentle light filtering through this sun-dappled forest makes it a popular spot for nature walks. Caterpie, Weedle, their evolutions, Metapod, and Kakuna, who just wait until they evolve or get eaten, unless you're Kakuna, in which case you have a spike that can come out of your chest and try to keep you alive. Pikachu roasting berries for food, the 3 pan monkeys not eating meat or bugs, for those of you that are mentally separating those, and thriving together as a trio, and then add in our Fletchling and Scatterbug. Shockingly, the fastest we ever have, or probably ever will, explain an entire forest in Pokemon. Unova took me, I don't even want to know how long, when I first had to go through the first forest in Unova. It was absurd. Route 3. The little rises and hollows of this lush forest are a favorite place of many kinds of Pokemon to play. Returning Pokemon include Pidgey, Pikachu, Fletchling, and Scatterbug. Dunsparce is eating mushrooms, potentially some fruit and vegetables, while digging away the second it hears danger. Azurill is doing its best to survive, since its nutrient-rich tail bulb contains everything it needs in order to evolve. It might swim, eat a few fish if necessary for calories, but it's overall just doing its best to not get eaten by any desperate Pokemon, or Pidgey for that matter, since it is a mouse and Pidgey will eat mice. It's a weird Pokemon. It goes from mouse to rabbits. Bidoof is doing as beavers do, eating leaves and gnawing on bark, maybe making a dam or two in the process, which is ultimately allowing biodiversity between all the trees in the area, just in case a disease comes through and tries to kill all the trees. Then we throw in Burmy, which this is actually the first time it has appeared without needing a honey tree, so let's talk about our bagworm. Burmy is a small larval Pokemon with a black segmented body and a coiled antenna on top of its head. It has a beak-like mouth and yellow eyes. It also has 3 forms: Plant Cloak, Sandy Cloak, and Trash Cloak. Burmy is normally covered by a cloak, with 3 known variants that consist of either twigs and leaves, sand and mud bound by its own silk, or dust and garbage resembling pink building insulation. Burmy, no, you can't eat the cotton candy from inside of the walls. It will kill you, let alone cover yourself in it. Stop. Even if it is born where there are no cocooning materials, it somehow always ends up with a cloak. The cloak protects it from the cold and will become thinner when the weather is hot. Burmy, if female, evolves into Wormadam, and if male, evolves into Mothim. When evolving into Wormadam, its form determines the form of Wormadam it evolves into, which is permanent. I've actually dealt with bagworms in the past, and they are incredibly parasitic, as they will literally create a big old bag or net of silk to nest inside, attaching to branches and eating all the leaves or needles that they can, and reproducing in massive numbers. They just swarm, and they look like, I don't know, How do I describe this? You know how caterpillar poop looks? That's what they look like. I can't, or at least the ones I dealt with looked like that. So I couldn't tell if they were just small bagworms, poop left behind by them, or what else was going on, because then you had actual bagworms moving about in there. I might have touched poop. I don't know. I had gloves on at the very least. This will ultimately, though, kill the trees, as you can't photosynthesize without leaves after all. So Burmy, too, shall hang from trees as it actually does, and use its clothing for food and food for clothing to at least semi-follow the lines of our real-life bagworms. Bumblebee and fledgling are also here. Basically, all of this means that the only real new addition is whenever one of the birds wisen up and eat a Burmy without a cloak. Alternatively, it is incredibly funny when you think of the idea that Bidoof might be nomming on some of these trees, cause them to fall over because they see a single leaf at the top of a tree and they're like, I want that one. I want that one and that one only. So then they just hyper-focus, cut the tree down, and in doing so, they knock a Burmy off. Who knows? Maybe the leaf that it wanted was attached to a Burmy. So the Bidoof eats away the cloak, the Burmy no longer has a cloak, and it is a lot easier to identify and get attacked by bird Pokemon. The circle of life is beautiful, isn't it? Route 4. This famed path's perfectly designed and executed guardians are its highlight and a special point of pride. All of our encounters are actually on yellow or red flowers, which helps us understand what flowers these Pokemon prefer to be among. If I don't mention a difference in encounter rates, then assume that they're equal or at least negligible for the most part, whether that's here or on future routes. Ladybug, even though there's not a time in this game, is primarily around in the morning based on its information, eating pollen and nectar only, despite also being based on the ladybug, which will eat more than just pollen or nectar depending on the type of ladybug. They occur 3 times as often on the red flowers, likely meaning they prefer those flowers for their camouflage. Ralts is here, consuming emotions and existing here only as a little pathway for it to go through. After all, Lumio City is close by, and Ralts is primarily an urban Pokemon that feeds on emotions. So, this is just, again, a pathway that they take. Skitty the kitty, who lives in tree holes and is just passing through, and considering it is a cat, it is an obligate carnivore. Despite that, there really isn't any Pokemon here that is likely being hunted down by Skitty. Maybe a bug or two just because it needs food, but otherwise nothing consistent. Badoo is here just because this is a great place for flowers to grow, meaning the soil, sunlight, and water is likely in good amounts, which will hopefully help it grow in turn. Meanwhile, Combee, who is also eating nectar and honey, actually appears 3 times as often on the yellow flowers, once again, likely being a result of it camouflaging well with them. Then we add in Flabebe, our new Pokemon here. Flabebe is usually seen holding the yellow stigma of a flower called a fairy flower in the Pokemon the Series X and Y episode To Find a Fairy Flower. The flower has 3 stamens and rounded petals that can be red, yellow, orange, blue, or white. It also has a short green stem with 3 small leaves. Its crown is made from the flower's pollen, which has healing properties. Flabebe can control and draw power out of the flower, but is unsafe without it. However, it will continue searching until it finds a flower that it likes. Once it does, Flabebe will spend the rest of its life taking care of that flower. The Pokemon Journeys the Series episode Under Color of Darkness showed that if one of the petals on a Flabebe's flower falls off, it will be unable to float around. What's interesting is that they can have the ability Symbiosis, hinting at the idea that Flabebe keeps the flower alive, as it does directly state, and the flower actually keeps Flabebe alive, meaning that Flabebe doesn't necessarily consume anything and is much like a fungus within the Wood Wide Web. It provides the flower with the best care necessary for it to stay alive and grow, and the flower gives energy to Flabebe in return. I don't think many Pokemon would ever really try to eat Flabebe directly, but any Pokemon that would eat the flower will effectively put Flabebe in danger. Maybe a Skitty will see the movement and become interested enough to pounce since it likes movement, but I don't think we'll find any dangers for Flabebe here. Also, if you want a Flabebe holding a certain colored flower, then go to the field of flowers with that color. Pretty straightforward. Route 5. Roller skaters from across the Kalos region gather on its hilly path to demonstrate their best skills. Bumblebee is back, Abra eats a berry and then teleports to Arceus knows where at the first sign of trouble. Doduo is eating plants and small mammals, putting Bunnelby at risk for the first time on a route, though it may have some trouble with our other small mammals found here, such as Minun and Plusle, who will fight back. In the meantime, though, they're just enjoying their berries. Gulpin is out here playing cleanup crew since it can't effectively digest basically anything with the intense acid that is within its stomach. It is the stomach Pokemon, after all. And last of our oldies is Scraggy, appearing in hordes and eating insects, seeds, and flowers while fighting whatever comes across its path, including each other because it's just, a scrappy little fella. Then we add in 3 more Pokemon, one of which loves to be amongst the purple flowers here, as Skiddo's encounter rate triples within them. Skiddo can perform photosynthesis with the leaves on its back, which means that it does not need to eat so long as it has sunshine and water. Note. It has a docile nature and is thought to be one of the first Pokemon to live alongside humans, who ride it to travel across mountains. As seen in the Pokemon the Series X and Y episode, A Race for Home, milk from Skiddo can be used to make dairy products. I have to admit, at least right now, let's just take a small tangent. I hide my small tangents a little bit better now. I know a lot of you miss them, but I also just hide them better. Anywho, small tangent. You know what I really miss? Sweetened condensed milk. You eat them with like a fried bread called buñuelo. I'm not Colombian, but I believe that they're more of a Colombian, like breakfast-ish meal, like a light snack meal sort of thing. You literally just dip the fried soft bread into evaporated, or not evaporated, sweetened condensed milk, and it's so delicious. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And they're just buñuelos because they're just little balls of bread. They're great. And every time I think of goat milk, I think of that for some reason, even though I don't think I ever had it with goat milk. Anywho, going back to Skiddo, what this means is that we have a symbiotic relationship once more. Skiddo will only ever need to eat if there isn't enough sunshine and water, and since it is a goat, it will commonly just eat grass. Nothing surprising there, but I wonder if they're born with all of that like leafage on their back, or if it's something that grows on them due to their diet. If it was something that was like, a Galarica seed is to a Slowpoke, that'd be really interesting to find out, but I don't think we will. Pancham looks up to Pangoro as a leader, and tries to emulate its behavior in an effort to learn how to battle and hunt for its prey. So it's hunting for break. Fantastic. That is a bit unexpected, but we'll come back to that later. If Pancham makes a big mistake, Pangoro will take away its leaf. It tries to make itself look serious to its foes, but its glare is not intimidating enough, and if it gets distracted, it ends up grinning instead. Despite its attempts to look frightening, it cannot help grinning if patted on its head. Just a cute little guy, bonk. Pangoro itself doesn't state a diet, but it does state that it will engage with duels with Obstagoon, so it might eat the Obstagoon line if it wins, and vice versa for that matter, and that Pokemon, again, is only native to Galar, not here. Now, let's learn about pandas in real life to try and figure out this diet a little bit better. According to the World Wildlife Fund, a panda's daily diet consists almost entirely of the leaves, stems, and shoots of various bamboo species. You probably knew this. Bamboo contains very little nutritional value, so pandas must eat 12 to 38 kilograms every day to meet their energy needs. But they do branch out, with about 1% of their diet comprising other plants and even meat. Here we go. While they are almost entirely vegetarian, I'm so sorry. Pandas will sometimes hunt for pikas, however you say that, and other small rodents. And because I didn't know what a pika is, they're small, mountain-dwelling mammals native to Asia and North America, which look like mice, but are lagomorphs, being more closely related to rabbits and hares rather than rodents. So, we can assume that Pancham and Pangoro are likely eating small mammals, but still eating plenty of bamboo. I mean, we have a bear. What did we really expect? The final entry here, though, is Furfrou, which actually appears half as much in the purple flowers. Must not like their smell, I suppose. Furfrou used to guard the king in the ancient times of Kalos and is known to be loyal to its trainer. Furfrou is said to be very intelligent. It has 10 different forms, named after the style its fur is trimmed, and dyed in: natural, heart, star, diamond, debutante, matron, dandy, leraine, kabuki, and pharaoh. It is commonly seen with its fur trimmed and dyed into various styles. However, only those it trusts are allowed to cut its fur. In the past, aristocrats would even compete over who could trim its fur into the most exquisite style. Cutting its fur increases the swiftness of its movement. Must be super heavy, I suppose. It primarily takes after poodles, which were actually used for hunting, especially for hunting waterfowl, since their fur can not only help them keep warm, but also very quickly wick away any water that was on their fur. Also, since we have a wild dog here, we can easily bet that they're eating whatever they can catch that is smaller than them. And if they can work in packs, they will go after anything bigger than them. This very well could put anything here on the route as the meal for a dinner plate, excluding Gulpin unless they want to have some real acidic haggis. I would paint a picture here, but it's honestly a bunch of Pokemon eating berries and grazing until Doduo decides to snatch up one of the smaller Pokemon, Pancham gets desperate enough to eat a Bunnelby, or Furfru comes in and cleans house by eating any of the Pokemon here, maybe even getting bold enough to attack a Doduo. And any scraps left afterwards is going to get swallowed by Gulpin. So we'll save picture painting for more interesting routes. Route 6. This tree-lined path was once covered with grass as tall as a man, but it was cleared by the palace. I hate the palace now. You know what? Down with the aristocrats! Take it down! Tear down their walls! Send all of their wealth to everybody else! We're done here! Send in the Golurk! Bash it down! Oddish the Wanderer has the highest encounter rate here and hides during the day, then moves around at night so it doesn't get sunburned as it looks for water and nutrient-rich soil. Sentret is here hunting after bugs, small mammals such as rodents, and eating whatever berries it finds. Nincada being a cicada, eating roots of plants primarily. Kecleon is also going after insects, though it is a little bit rarer here. Hard to tell if that's because it has lower numbers or because it's just invisible. In rustling bushes, though, we have Venipede, who will actively attack anything and everything it thinks that it can beat and eat. And finally, before our two new entries, we have Audino, who is able to escape long before others get close to it thanks to its ears. It's just eating fruits and veggies and probably helping other Pokemon here and there. Esper is one of our first new friends. Its ears are quite large in proportion to its body and folded. Beneath its ears are two ring-shaped yellow organs. These organs emit Esper's intense psychic powers. It has no control over its power, and it would leak out if the ears were not sheltering the organs. It has enough psychic energy to create a blast radius of 300 feet, 90 meters. This psychic energy can send even a wrestler flying, so at least it isn't necessarily fatal, but the impact of you hitting whatever you run into after being sent flying might be. While its blank expression barely changes, beneath it is an intense struggle, trying so hard to control its psychic powers. Esper can fall unconscious if its psychic power builds up too much. Now, that doesn't state a diet, but its evolution Meowstic also doesn't state a dietary preference even. They are cats in the end though, and Esper itself specifically likely being based on the Scottish Fold breed. Though, again, since they are cats, we can easily assume that they are obligate carnivores as cats are. This puts Sentret in danger, and the rare Kecleon if it's so unlucky to get blasted by psychic energy accidentally. Esper is also small though, meaning that it may have a tough time against Sentret, who is not only larger, but also travels in groups, even if they don't have entire hordes here, which may actually show us that they don't travel in groups in this specific area. In fact, Esper and Sentret have the same encounter rate though, meaning that they are likely competing for food despite Esper not eating bugs. Honestly, this whole area is actually very terrible for Esper, especially when we take the next entry into account, Honedge. Honedge is said to have been born from a person's soul after they were killed by the sword that it resides in. Again, imagine just sink, well, at least I'm dead. Oh, I'm the sword now. Great. That's a tortured existence. Imagine doing that for anything else. If you die in the toilet, you become part of the toilet. If you die by a rock, you become a rock. How terrible is that? Just becoming the thing that killed you. Its sash is prehensile, and it holds its sheath when it is battling. Honedge is known to wrap its sash around people's arms and suck their life energy if they dare to grab it by the hilt. Great. It doesn't say anything about stealing energy from Pokemon, no, it specifically states that it steals life energy from people, the little vengeful spirit that it is. The rest of the Pokemon on the route are at least safe from it then. Route 7. The longest single road in the Kalos region runs straight alongside one of its greatest rivers, which is weird because you can't fish in that river. There's a lot of water in this region you can't really fish in, which makes me feel really weird about it all, but it is what it is. Flabébé is back, though. Smeargle is just a beagle eating whatever comes its way. Volbeat and Illumis are consuming pollen and nectar as they team up with Roselia, as they have in every other route we see them on. In fact, that's the first time we see these three Pokemon when they first appear in the games. They appear pretty much together on every single route that they are on. With Roselia, it is just doing plant things and stabbing anyone who wants to try and steal their roses. Krogunk is an interesting case, though, as I have stated in the past that most other fighting types won't eat other Pokemon, but Krogunk is a different case. Poison dart frogs are carnivores, surviving on a diet of small insects. Things like fruit flies, termites, ants, young crickets, and some smaller species of beetles. They're excellent opportunistic hunters, relying on their long, sticky tongues to flash out and catch fast-moving prey in the blink of an eye. Thank you, Blue Planet Aquarium. So yes, Krogunk is going after insects. Meanwhile, Ducklet is only eating peat and bog moss, despite being a duck. Our other duck, Psyduck, is also here in hordes, eating fish and bugs whenever its headache doesn't debilitate it. All while Hoppip also float through the area as groups in their horde encounters, just soaking up sunlight, aimlessly wandering around the world with the wind. Though what's interesting is that we now find on this route Spritzee and Swirlix. Spritzee emits a scent that varies based on its diet and enraptures those around it using a scent pouch. That's important. In the past, royal ladies carried Spritzee with them instead of using perfume. The fragrance changes depending on what it has eaten. Because of that fragrant pouch, and because of what it looks like, we're going to make a very strange argument for Spritzee's diet being based on it having the Plague Doctor inspired designs. When we look at the beak of the Plague Doctor, they would fill it with different items in order to fill their masks with good smells and odors. These odors are basically thought to push away the bad smells, meaning that disease would be kept at bay while also dealing with the dead and dying. By the way, they also thought that their clothing was bacteria resistant, when in fact, all the bacteria would go on the clothing, and they would transfer diseases and sicknesses between their patients. Great doctors. But within their beaks, they would stuff the tip of it with dried flowers, herbs, spices, camphor, or a vinegar sponge. Considering that we only have just found Spritzee here, where we also for the first time see both purple and yellow flowers, we can safely assume that Spritzee in fact does eat flowers at the very least, likely eating whatever seeds may also come from them. This would explain the scents that they give off, what they're putting into their pouch, and why they are valued for creating perfume. As for Swirlix, it only eats sweets, which makes its fur as sticky as cotton candy. I never ever want to touch it in that case. I'm sorry, it's cute, but no, I don't want to feel sticky afterwards. Though its fur is said to smell like cotton candy as well. It can entangle its opponents with white sticky thread. The amount of sugar it eats is equal to its weight. It is known to become grumpy if it doesn't eat enough sugar. So why is it here on this route? Well, because the berry fields are nearby. Well, yes, we the player have to jumpstart the berry fields. We can assume that they would eventually begin planting berries here, otherwise why is there a field? And even if we make a comparison with fruits such as cranberries in real life that taste bitter to us, cranberries have a lot of nutrients and sugars to animals such as cows, which will actually get drunk off of them. Or how robins can get drunk on honeysuckle berries as well. Those natural sugars, even if small to us, are a lot to other creatures. As such, when they digest them and it processes all the nutrients and everything within them, we can end up with a lot of sugar, allowing us to know that Swirlix is fiending after berries in order to get their fill of sugars. Not a lot of interactions on this route, although what interests me the most is if other Pokemon would eat Swirlix. It is the cotton candy Pokemon after all, so I guess if a Pokemon is desperate for sugars, then maybe we would find it being eaten. I will also take a small side tangent, or a small tangent, because I was originally making my own region. At this point, I'm actually running Pokemon Star Signs, which is a Pokemon D&D show that happens live on stream and has a playlist, happens every Friday, 8:30 p.m. CST. original story 10 years after the Alola events. Back when I was making my own region, I actually made something called Roboing, which is a robin-based Pokemon that would eat honeysuckle. It form of honeysuckle within the world of Pokemon, I do suppose. As it would eat it, it would eventually evolve, it would show its other kind where they are, and they would be known to, at first, in their first form, kind of drunkenly dance around. In its second form, it would actually use that to their best advantage, being able to be like a Spinda in some capacity, and then, when it hits its final form, the only way it would do so is when there are too many Robins, or its second form, in an area, causing them to actually engage in a berry eating contest. The winner of that berry eating contest, eating so many of these berries that do make them drunk, would actually evolve the Pokemon from a normal flying type into a flying poison type, allowing it to basically use that berry juice as part of its own armory for the most part. So just something small that I wanted to share, and I didn't want it to be left completely in the past. Connecting Cave. This cave linking Route 7 and Silage City is notable for its great hordes of Zubat. So yes, we have the strictly blood-consuming Zubat, Wishmer, who is eating berries, Meditite eating a berry a week, and Axew also crushing up berries as it has not changed up its diet yet in order to eat other Pokemon as its evolutions will. Way less here than I was expecting in terms of the Pokemon within the cave, and they all just don't really interact. Yeah, sure, Zubat might pop in and try to take some blood, but it's gonna get smacked down by Whismer's loud screaming, Meditite being a psychic type, and then Axew just being a strong dragon type, honestly. And everyone has the same encounter rate except for Axew, which we could assume is simply because it is a dragon, a rarer Pokemon that is likely just here wandering through, somehow got here, and doesn't necessarily belong, as it does not call this cave its home. Route 8. This is a road of great contrasts, from the harsh rock of the cliffs to the soft sands of the beach. We're getting a lot of repeats here from past editions, but I am very curious as to how this area functions overall, so I will paint a picture at the end of this route. Spoik is eating mushrooms, Zangoose and Seviper are competing with each other and eating every other mammal in the area, as they have the same diet, eggs, small mammals, maybe larger mammals, because shockingly yes, mongoose and snakes have similar diets. Absol is shockingly here, and we will come back to them later as they're just a peaceful Pokemon avoiding battle and eating plants and potentially even roots thanks to its claw and horn. Then we have Drifloon, who will drag others away, potentially consuming souls, as that gets really weird overall as well. Mienfoo is an herbivore despite its real-life inspirations, and then we have Bagon, who we never got to talk about, and Inkay. Bagon live in rough terrains with cliffs and rocks. It longs to fly and jumps off cliffs to be able to do so. Frustrated at its inability to fly, it leaps off cliffs and smashes its head against large rocks indiscriminately. This process of continually bashing its head causes it to become as hard as steel. Well-developed neck muscles support its hard head. Actually, that's very much like a giraffe. This, combined with its powerful body, allows it to shatter rocks with its head. Bagon is known to be rather solitary, preferring not to form groups with others of its kind. It has been theorized that Bagon's habit of head bashing and pure belief influences the cells needed to help it evolve. You just gotta believe, gotta hit that Parappa the Rappa mindset. Also, yes, just to expand on what I said earlier, the reason or one reason why giraffes have a long neck is not just because, oh, we adapted our long neck so we can eat leaves. And I'm saying this even though giraffes are my favorite animal, so bear with me. We are just eating this so we can eat leaves that are high up so that no other animal can take our food. No. Because if you look at the fact of that, how giraffes go through their mating rituals, they will slam their heads into other male giraffes. Now, how do you make sure that you win those fights and can mate? Oh, you get a thicker skull, a heavier skull. Well, at some point, your neck is not going to be able to support that. And instead of getting a massive, just wide neck, the neck grew longer, allowing them to not only support their thick, heavy skull with a strong neck with full of muscle, but also have a neck that they can use for, I don't know, something like centripetal force, kind of like a rock on a string, and slam with more force. So yeah, there's how giraffes work. It's wild, isn't it? Anywho, we don't get a diet for Bagon. We don't get one for Shelgon, as it doesn't eat or drink at all. And then we land on Salamence, which also doesn't state anything. It just states that it can be aggressive, will shoot flames all over the place, and is overall a very happy Pokemon because it can finally fly. Though, I don't think anyone will disagree with me if I were to state that Bagon and Salamence would be creatures that would likely eat whatever comes their way. Pokemon, plants, plant Pokemon, you name it. Whatever it needs to get by. It's rare here, hitting at about 5%, so it's not like it's making a massive impact and is probably just focusing on trying not to die as it jumps off of cliffs. Inkay can cause its luminescent spots to blink and flash. This behavior serves a variety of uses. If Inkay is threatened, the blinking lights will cause its opponents to become dazed and lose their will to battle, allowing it to escape. The blinking also serves to attract Inkay's prey, which is then ensnared and held in place by its tentacles. Inkay also uses various complex rhythms and patterns of light to communicate to others of its kind. Because of this, Inkay instinctively reacts to anything in its habitat to emit light or echoing sounds. By floating upside down, it improves its blood flow along with clearing its head. This also drastically boosts the power of Inkay's psychic moves and is what triggers its evolution into Malamar. Inkay clearly then states that it goes after something for prey. What makes it odd is that we know we can find them on the land or in the water. They're basically squids or cuttlefish, allowing us to look at their diets for a better idea as to what Inkay consumes. Thanks to the Antarctic Australian program, I said that in the wrong order, squid mainly eat fish and crustaceans. They're also known to be cannibalistic and may feed on each other. I'm sorry, now I'm just imagining a bunch of Inkay duking it out, especially when caught in nets. It is thought that squids can routinely eat 30% or more of their body weight in a day. They may increase in biomass by 10 to 15% per day in the first half of their life cycle. Meanwhile, with cuttlefish, thanks to PBS.org, cuttlefish are carnivores and probably one of my favorite sea creatures, preying on small mollusks, crabs, fish, shrimp, octopus worms, and other cuttlefish. They use their extendable tentacles to grab prey, which they immobilize with a toxic spike. Their beak, located at the base of their arms, is sharp enough to break hard crab shells. Somewhat the same diet between the two as we could have expected, but where are these supposed crabs at if they're on land? Well, if we look under some of the rocks, we'll discover two more Pokemon here. One of them being Dwebble, whom Inkay will prey upon. The Dwebble, being hermit crabs, despite being bug-type Pokemon, are going to also be opportunistic omnivores themselves, being the cleanup crew of the area. Though the other creature hiding under the rock, or more aptly hiding in the rock, is actually Binacle. Binacle is always found as a pair living in a single gray rock, and they need to cooperate with each other in order to survive. It moves by stretching and contracting its bodies and yanking the rock along in a hopping motion. The pair has a tendency of squabbling with one another. When they do, one of them will move and find a different rock with a different Binacle to live alongside with. They eat seaweed that washes up on the shoreline. Thank you, Pokemon, for making that nice and clear. Also, seeing a lone Binacle is kind of cursed, in my opinion. But we aren't done yet, because there's one more Pokemon within our level range that we can at least mention, being Luvdisc, who, based on its real-life inspirations, the discus fish, is eating small worms, crustaceans, plant matter, insects, and detritus. Luvdisc is the bottom of the food chain, essentially, also serving primarily as cleanup crew, but picking at those crustaceans which really aren't here, at least not for it, and it really isn't dependent on hunting other Pokemon, considering other locations that we find it in. So, we would moreover consider it a Pokemon that is a Detrivore. Our last two Pokemon only occur in Horde encounters, which include Talo, who is strictly eating only insects, and Wingull, who is happily munching on fish, bugs, pretty much everything. Honestly, as others have said in the past, it would be a lot easier to list the things that seagulls, Wingull in this case, do not eat, rather than listing everything that they do eat. Before we get to the picture painting though, this is the only place where Absol has appeared and there isn't a major threat nearby, and that weirds me out. Every other place has been right outside of Kyurem's location, just before the summit of Mount Coronet, where Dialga and Palkia will be captured by Team Galactic, or in the past they appeared because of whatever happened in Hisui, in locations just outside of where the Regis can be found. And it's just, again, weird to not have a major threat here yet our Omen Pokemon is found here. Maybe it just likes the yellow flower since its encounter rate increases, or rather doubles, to 20% in the yellow flowers here. Which, while it isn't a dog, most people consider it to be a dog, and dogs see the color yellow pretty well. In fact, just as another tiny small tangent, my dog Jaeger, his favorite color is definitely yellow. Everything, if he sees the color yellow, he will run to it. He loves it. But putting that aside, let's just get into the picture painting for this route. Spoink bounces onto the scene, balancing the pink pearl on its head, a treasure that it has obtained from the sea and happily carries with it wherever it goes. As it bounces along, it meets a friend along the way, Minfu, training in the sands of the beach. But Spoink dare not jump into the sand, otherwise it'll take too much energy to continue bouncing, and its heart may just stop. Unfortunately for our Spoink though, there are a number of Pokemon with their eyes on it for their next tasty meal. Well, if Bagon were more interested in hunting rather than jumping off of cliffs as they wish for wings, that would be another worry. But Bagon is pretty occupied with falling onto its head from great heights. No, rather, an unexpected Pokemon is here, ready to grab Spoink. Drifloon. The reason behind this is because Drifblim will actively hunt Clamperl for their pearls. Meanwhile, Spoink gets its pearl from Clamperls. This puts our little piggy here on the chopping block for Drifloon as it tries to swoop in and grab this pink pearl. But it doesn't work out, considering Drifloon can't really control its movement all that well, so Spoink keeps the pearl for another day as the winds carry Drifloon away. Bounding along further, Spoink is accosted once more, cornered by a Seviper who prepares to strike out and end the life of Spoink, only for Zangoose to tackle Seviper away. Though this is not an act of benevolence, this is simply Zangoose fighting its mortal enemy and potentially wanting to eat Spoink for itself in the future. Although, if it can kill the Seviper, that would prove for a great meal for today. As the two quarrel with each other, Spoink pogo sticks away rapidly. It finally gets to rest behind a rock overlooking the sand and water. Peace at last. And on that beach, we see an Inkay floating along in the air, checking one rock after another. It uncovers some barnacle eating whatever bits of seaweed have made their way on shore, but then it moves just the right rock to discover Dwebble. And while a bug would normally be able to handle a psychic type, when under the hypnosis of Inkay's rapidly oscillating lights, Dwebble is helpless and a delicious meal. That is until Wingull swoops in with a high-pitched squaw snatching away the squid. Dwebble finds itself a moment of relief, knowing there is always the chance that if it is found without its shell, it would be an easy target for other birds. So, as it tries to get back into its rock, unfortunately, a Talo quickly swoops in next to take the recovering Dwebble away for its next meal. An unlucky day for Dwebble, assuredly. Though, day in and day out, as the waves take and give, other Dwebble and even Lovedisk are able to do as the Detrivores do and scavenge the scraps of the day away. We now close this route and move on to the next one. Route 9. This rocky passage was created by retired Rhyhorn racers who forged a path where there was none. Hippopotas, unlike a hippo's normal diet, has a diet that consists of whatever falls into its mouth as it swallows and expels the sand that it got into its mouth. This puts our other two Pokemon here in danger, one of them being Sandile, who is also just eating literally everything made of meat that crosses its path, and then poor Helioptile, who just wants to absorb sunlight and live its day basking away. So I just had the realization that I just rattled off Helioptile because of the fact that for some reason I thought it was from Unova. So, when just going over that part just now, I didn't think twice about talking about Helioptile. Well, yes, I was correct, luckily, in the whole idea that it doesn't need to eat food. So, let's just quickly go over Helioptile while I was in the editing process of the video, actually. It has frills that have cells that generate electricity when exposed to sunlight. This allows it to create its own energy and thrive without food in its desert home. The frills act similar to solar panels and are the source of Helioptile's electric moves. However, should this process get interrupted, Helioptile will be stressed to the point of weakness. As seen in one of its attack animations in the games, its head and frills glow with a pale yellow light when it uses certain moves. So, had to give justice to Helioptile here and properly talk about all of its information, because yes, it is really cool that its Helios is in part of its name, you know, god of the sun and all that good stuff, at least, well, god that personifies the sun within Greek religion and mythology. So, fun little Pokemon, and nothing actually crazy here. Though we know Hippopotas and Sandile are not interacting that much unless necessary, as they have the same encounter rate and are kind of ambush predators by all means, once again making them competitors in terms of food. There is a very good chance that they may even get the upper hand on one another, whoever is caught unawares, then becoming the meal for the other one, but not often enough that it is a danger and would cause them to evolve. Glittering Cave. Lose all sense of direction as you wander through this cave, where luminous moss grows emerald green. This cave, oddly enough, has no Pokemon from this generation within it, but I will still quickly go over the Pokemon here. Machop, being the highest encounter rate, building muscle, eating beans, berries, and lifting or fighting others. Onix, being one of the big reasons this cave is formed as it burrows and absorbs materials. Cubone being the second highest encounter rate as it cries, eats berries, and waits for the day that it does evolve. Rhyhorn is foraging through the grass and eating it outside and smashing through the rock inside, creating more tunnels as it expands its territory. Kangaskhan is likely just using this as a resting spot, eating grass, leaves, ferns, flowers, fruit, and moss where it can, considering it is a kangaroo. Then we get the reverse anglerfish that is Mawile, waiting for someone, or something, to walk over and the camouflaged hair teeth thing that it has to snap at them. Doesn't matter if they're made out of meat, plants, rock, whatever, Mawile can consume anything as long as its jaws can crush it. Luckily for everyone here, it appears at the lowest percent. Then we have Lunatone and Solrock, who are self-sufficient, oddly enough, either absorbing light when they can or just persisting on nothing. If you don't wear a hard hat in this area, by the way, you're gonna get a concussion, as both Woobat and Ferroseed drop from the ceiling. Woobat eats bug Pokemon despite being based on a frugivore bat, which we do find Dwebble inside this cave. Meanwhile, Ferroseed is just scraping up moss and metals for its body to absorb. And that's really our glittering cave. Let's just get to the other side. And on the other side, we've reached Coastal Kalos. Let's talk about the geography here before moving on to the next route. Coastal Kalos is located by the vast sea in the western parts of Kalos. The mainly explored area is a strip between mountains and the sea. This area is dominated by rocky shores in the southwest and lush beaches and forests in the northwest. Most human settlements are located by the sea. The peninsula in the northwest is known for its menhir stones. There are many important locations such as Reflection Cave, Geosenge Town, and Shalar City with its Tower of Mastery. So we have Route 10. Countless stones line this mysterious path in such numbers and arrays that it seems overwhelming. This route is weird. There are dog Pokemon galore. So I'm gonna have some fun explaining the implications here after we talk about all the Pokemon here, because we really have a, what would otherwise seem like a dog-eat-dog world here. Eevee appearing actually for the first time in the wild. Eevee is rarely found in the wild, no duh, and is mostly only found in cities and towns. It is said to have an irregularly shaped genetic structure that is easily influenced by its environment. This allows it to adapt to a variety of habitats by evolving. Eevee can potentially evolve into 8 different evolutions, maybe more soon enough. Eevee can also start to adopt the face of the trainer that owns it. Eevee's genes are believed to have the key to solving the mysteries of Pokemon evolution. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, it is believed to dream about which form it will evolve into. So, Eevee is supposed to be a creature that you can vaguely remember in your dreams or from your dreams, though of course this means that it draws inspiration from dogs, cats, foxes, and rabbits if we look at its evolutions. In this case, to make this very nice and simple, despite those big old cute eyes that might just suck your soul away, we are going to be considering Eevee to be an omnivore. It makes the most sense considering its inspirations and that its evolutions will hunt for prey. Umbreon, Sylveon, so on and so forth. And only because it was created in this generation, I will make the exception and talk about Sylveon, because how can I not? It's in the thumbnail. Sylveon's ribbon-like feelers emit a soothing aura that erases any sense of hostility, enabling it to stop fights instantly. As mentioned in its sleep-style decks, Sylveon's soothing aura can allow any nearby trainers to obtain a good night's sleep whenever they go to sleep. When hunting, it swirls its feelers as a distraction, while the aura weakens feelings of hostility in its prey. Then it pounces on the victim. It will literally calm you down. It's like, oh, I'm not here for a fight. It's okay. We could be friends. Psych! And kill you. That is what we just learned. It will also wrap its feelers around its trainer's arm as they walk together, which allows it to read their feelings. When a fight breaks out between Sylveon and Dragon-type Pokemon, Sylveon will bravely charge at them even if they are much bigger than itself. In Galar, this feat is told as a fairy tale. So yeah, again, it is hunting other Pokemon, and it eating Greninja in the thumbnail? It's actually kind of a possibility, even though we can't find Greninja in the wild. Oops. Snubbull, Houndour, Electrike, all of our dogs, all of them are hunting after everything here. Or at least, we'll let you think that for now. Sigilyph is here, who doesn't eat anything, but is thought to be a guardian on patrol since it was first created by ancient civilizations. Emolga is flying, squirreling its way through, potentially attacking Yanma in the area as it collects berries, though Yanma may flip that around and eat it, other insects, fish, or other small mammals for that matter. Nosepass is likely here to leech up some metals where it can in hopes of evolving, and then Golett is also here, not eating anything, but rolling up some clay balls. The only other new Pokemon here to talk about, though, is Hawlucha. Hawlucha makes up for its small body with its proficiency in fighting, which allows it to keep up with bigger fighters, such as Machamp and Hariyama. It leaps around to stay in its opponent's blind spots and controls its position in the air by using its wings. A favored tactic is to strike from above because it is a difficult maneuver to defend against. However, Hawlucha has a tendency to show off in the heat of battle. Opponents can exploit its vanity to gain the upper hand. In Paldea, Primeape is Hawlucha's natural enemy. I mean, yeah, I could understand that too. Primeape kind of swinging wildly, angry, punch, punch, punch. You can't really predict an attack around that when its attacks are in 360 degrees at all times, unlike Machamp or some of these other ones, which have a more steady martial art fighting style, boxing, more straight punches, hooks, or jabs, maybe a couple of kicks here and there. It's easy to get around those, theoretically speaking, if you're trained. That's why you don't usually fight against certain martial art types when you are using a certain martial art type yourself. It's like actual type effectiveness and weakness. It's very weird to think about, actually. Like kickboxing, I would always imagine beat regular boxing, unless you just get the one good punch out. Anywho, I'm not an expert in that, so let's continue on. As much as I want to say it is a fighting type that is not eating other Pokemon, I simply cannot ignore Hawlucha having our hawk-like beak here. It is absolutely then tearing apart other prey such as Emolga or even some of the dog Pokemon. Though, I would like to present to you a counter argument for this specific location. All these Pokemon are here. Nearly all of them are aggressive. Nearly all of them are predators. Heck, Probopass is a predator that hunts after other mineral-based Pokemon. So Nosepass may even be hunting after Golett here for that matter. This whole area would be chaos, but I'm willing to argue that zero fighting occurs outside of the encounters that we have with trainers. Why? Because this is a Pokemon graveyard. Loyal Pokemon have gathered here. Dog Pokemon, Golett, Sigilyph, and other Pokemon that represent old humanity such as Nosepass. We can even look at Hawlucha and consider the idea of Lucha Libre, free fight. And while there is no historical record saying that Lucha Libre was used for freedom fighting, the pun is a little too on the nose for an area like this. Freedom, or the hope of it, from the past, as these Pokemon that are within their graves, their spirits are freed, and are no longer with us after that ultimate weapon had used their energy. This would not be the first and will not be the last time a location would be symbolic of a time in history within the Pokemon world, the people who lived here, or even beliefs held by people here. And I stand firm in stating that the Pokemon here are likely not fighting at all. We probably have some weird Fry's dog situation where all these dogs, despite not being around, assumedly, when the ultimate weapon was originally fired, just sitting and waiting for their owners to come back in a very sad way. Unless they're just passing through, like Emolga, in which case, you know, Emolga might get shot by Sigilyph. Oops. Route 11. One can feel the power of the Earth's interior from the crystals that sprout along this mountain path. It's also known as Mirror Way, This area is very interesting because we are going to see a lot of evolved Pokemon. When we see evolved Pokemon, we need to think about what causes them to evolve. There are a number of different ways, one being that there is an excess amount of food for them and it is a safe area allowing them to evolve. Another way is when Pokemon are competing with each other excessively for their food that they need to survive. And the final is when the Pokemon are being hunted consistently by other predator Pokemon, in which case the only way to survive is to either evolve or leave. Keep this in mind as we go through the Pokemon here and see if you can figure it out. Nidorina and Nidorino are eating whatever comes their way, if they can kill it. Though that is primarily Nidorino's job, while it is also searching for moonstones so it can evolve into a deadly monster that Nidoking is. Hariyama is an herbivore continuing its training here. Staravia eats both bugs and plants but not mammals. Chingling also hunts after prey, in fact hunting after birds. Stunky is an omnivore that prefers insects though will eat rodents. Both Throw and Sock are herbivores as they stay away from other Pokemon. And in Hordes, we find Nidoran male and female, and then Starly. Though before we break all of that down, we do have one new addition being Dedenne. Dedenne's upper whiskers serve as antennae that can send and receive electrical waves. This allows it to communicate with others of its own kind over great distances, sharing locations of food or electricity, and sense its surroundings. These simple lower whiskers are organs that can fire electricity. However, Dedenne is small, and its electricity generating organ is underdeveloped, making it unable to generate a lot of electricity on its own. It absorbs electricity from other electric Pokemon or from homes and buildings by plugging its tail into outlets. Dedenne are known to live near humans due to this behavior. When it is low on charge, it curls up and sleeps. And as mentioned in its sleep style decks, Dedenne will occasionally fall asleep while sucking on its tail. It is believed that Dedenne does this due to being happy with all the electricity it absorbed. I don't want to live in Kalos because of that. I'm not gonna lie. If my electricity bill triples because I didn't realize that Dedenne was coming in at night and stealing my electricity, I'm gonna throw a fit. I don't want to say I'll make them extinct because they are incredibly cute and that's really cruel for me to say, but like, shoot it out of a cannon, it'll survive. They get hit by Pokemon moves all the time. I'm sure it'll be okay. Now, Dedenne, it is based on either a gerbil, a Japanese dormouse, or a hamster. They will all have a similar diet in the end, though as we lean on the idea of the Japanese dormouse, we get its main food as insects, berries, nectar, or pollen. Though with our other two, we can add in grasses as it's added in diet, which would explain why we find it here where there are no flowers for us to at least encounter them within. So, did you figure out why there are so many evolutions here? And why there are hordes of Nidoran and Starly? Allow me to break this down. Throw and Sock are irrelevant here. Just get them away, they're training. Throw are literally throwing each other around, they can't resist throwing other Pokemon around, and Sock is completely solitary. Meanwhile, Starly would have normally been fine here, and so would the Nidorans have been, were it not for Chingling. In fact, we know that Chimecho does directly state, its evolution, that it hunts for prey. And I always suspected that they would hunt for birds, but they may actually hunt for our Nidos as well. Helps to have that psychic advantage over them. This would explain why the Nidos and Starly have actually evolved here and are only encountered in horde battles. Because the horde battles are actually you coming across their nests. And yes, you are a monster for attacking the defenseless little babies within them. What might throw you off though is Hariyama, who evolved from Makuhita only because it likes a challenge. Makuhita gets stronger every time it gets knocked down, literally. And what do we have here? Skilled fighting types, poison types, psychic types, and even Dedenne is a fairy type, making this the worst place for Makuhita to exist, but the best place for it to train and evolve. The last piece of this puzzle is simply to recognize that Nidorina, Nidorino, and Stunky are just foraging around for food, occasionally eating stray Dedenne that they may come across that may have fallen asleep in a random flower, as real-life dormouses may do, and yes, it is very cute, and yes, I will put that on screen now. But otherwise, that pretty much clears this route. Reflection Cave. The sheer faces of these rock walls reflect the images of people and Pokemon like nature's mirror. We primarily find Psychic-type Pokemon here, which is a little bit strange until we consider the fact that this place is basically just filled with reflective crystals. Crystals are seen as an amplifier for psychic power in superstition, so this all checks out. Woobat and Pharisee drop from the ceiling again. Mr. Mime is an herbivore, Wobbuffet is too. Sableye is eating gems, and our new Pokemon here, as it is likely having a heart attack from excitement. Chingling might be hunting small Pokemon found in Horde encounters, such as Mime Jr., which would explain why Mr. Mime is here, but Roggenrola hasn't evolved, meaning that it doesn't eat rocks or rock types, anything along those lines. And speaking of Roggenrola, they just consume water so that way they can grow and evolve. Solosis doesn't eat at all, and then we have the one that is being preyed upon by Sableye, Carbink. Carbink is born from the high temperatures and pressures underground. Since then, it has slept underground for millions of years. It is also occasionally found during cave excavations. It is known to compare its hard body with those of Geodude and Roggenrola. It is known to be preyed upon by Sableye and caught by Gabite. Carbink are not specially rare. The jewels on its body draw the attention from people. Rarely, Carbink will undergo a strange mutation and transform into the mythical Pokemon Diancie. It is said that a pack of Carbink lives with a Diancie queen, however you say it, in a jeweled kingdom deep underground. It is also said that there lies a mineral vein housing another larger pack of Carbink with another Diancie queen. Carbink is also one of the few Pokemon found in the Area 0 Underdepths. I've explained this also before, but I may as well here. Coal does not turn into diamond. Carbon, very similarly to Carbink, will randomly go, once it's under the right pressure and heat, and suddenly just transform into diamond. It could happen instantly, it could happen millions of years later, and that explains why nobody actually understands how it actually occurs, and that it just happens as it turns into Diancie. Also, poor Carbink, born to be eaten by Sableye and sleep within crystal caves as it doesn't eat at all. It will never know the exquisite taste of chicken Alfredo, or pie for that matter. And yes, those are my favorite foods. We're gonna move on. Not much of an ecosystem to talk about here. I'm just filling air. Route 12. Frolicking Skiddo can be seen and ridden on at the Bas de Mer Ranch. Sorry, I had to make sure I said that right. Located beside the breezy sea. Honestly, we have another route with nothing but old Pokemon, but we can at least use this route to see if it was designed with what Pokemon diets are stated to be, such as Heracross, who is found in the yellow flowers 6 times more often than in the grass. Slowpoke is wandering around here, eating what it can and likely moving to the water for a fish. It shares the highest encounter rate with Shoutout, who is a seed eater, putting Execute in a bit of a scary spot as it tries to absorb enough sunlight to evolve itself. Luckily, it does, Execute, have enough psychic power to drive away Shoutout fairly easily, since it does so with Pidgeotto. Pachirisu scampers about, eating berries, avoiding some of our scarier Pokemon in the meantime, such as Pinsir, who is also here, but doesn't seem to care for the yellow flowers, considering there are plenty of other potential meals available to it. Though, it does have to be careful, because there are Tauros in the area grazing away, and they do charge in hordes. Speaking of hordes, this really follows the fact that it is a farming route, as we also find Miltank, who appears in hordes, and loves the yellow flowers. Mareep is also here in hordes, alongside Wingull, who fly over the sea looking for their next meal of seafood. Our seafood, in turn, has actually expanded, as following Lovedisc, we have Remoraid shooting down any bugs that fly by, if only there were a couple of our little bagworm Pokemon in the area. Tentacool eating whatever it drifts by. Mantike also eating fish but being friends with Remoraid. Clampo grabbing whatever fish passed by, and shockingly, with a 1% encounter rate, we do find Lapras here, who is a big fan of eating fish. Obviously, they have a very low encounter rate because they are a sought-after Pokemon, mechanically, but it also makes sense that it has such a low encounter rate because the waters cannot support a ton of Lapras, who, in the modern day, are said to have eaten so much fish that they are now putting other fish at risk of endangerment. Ironic, isn't it? Oh, and both Dwebble and Binacle are found through Rock Smash again. It's more of a farming area, nothing too excessive to talk about, again with a lot of old Pokemon that now appear in the modern day together. And it all seems to make fairly good sense and is consistent with things we have said in the past, which is great to see. We can now move on. Azure Bay, the deep blue ocean of Kalos' coast where Pokemon from distant lands are said to visit. Take away our farm animals and add in Chinchu in the water who is eating fish, and you already have this place covered with all the encounters that are there. We move on to Route 13. Since no plants can grow in the red clay of this Great Plain, it hosts the power plant instead. Okay, I gotta nerd out just a little bit, because red clay is actually typically indicative of a lot of iron oxides, such as basalt. It's also often called terra rosa, or red earth, or scientifically, utilsol. Soil was what made me want to go to college, when I wanted to go for environmental studies, so it's always going to hold a very special place in my heart. Here, though, we do encounter the root-eating Dug Trio, Trapinch, who just waits for someone to fall into its trap, Gibble, who is also just eating whatever falls or comes across its path, Graveler, looking for mossy rocks to eat, and finally Slugma, who doesn't need to eat. Nothing crazy here. We are officially in the last third of Kalos with Mountain Kalos. Mountain Kalos is located in the eastern reaches of the region. The area is largely mountainous, and the temperatures tend to be cooler than in the other parts, with some routes and settlements having snow covering them. To the north, there is a marshy area that is said to be haunted. However, the settlements are plentiful, and there are some important landmarks, such as the Kalos power plant that is built on a harsh wasteland, the Pokeball factory in Laver City, and the Pokemon League itself. Killude City is located outside the three divisions and is only reachable by train from Lumio City. The city is relatively isolated from other parts of the region, being completely surrounded by mountains. Route 14. The lush trees and boggy swamps of this trail give off an eerie vibe, even in broad daylight, and we have a swamp! Swamps are so cool and unique, even in real life. Such a special environment for specialized critters, and that's no different in the Pokemon world. Weepinbell, eating whatever falls into its mouth, is found here. Haunter is here too, stealing the life of anything that it wants, but luckily it has a low encounter rate of 5%. It's likely here because it's a nice shaded environment. Quagsire is living the dream, as this is such a moist environment that it doesn't have to stay in the water, meaning that this Japanese giant salamander Pokemon can eat its fill of fish, crustaceans, bugs, snakes, and small mammals, which is unfortunate for some of the Pokemon we're going to talk about next, such as Skorupi, who's going to eat whatever it can in terms of bugs and mammals, being an opportunistic predator. Codivine also takes no prisoners here, just like Weepinbell, and if it fits the Pokemon into its mouth, the Pokemon gets eaten. That is how Carnivine works. At least, it primarily eats insects. Unfortunately, that means we add Carablast and Shelmet to the list of creatures being eaten by more Pokemon here, since they are here as well. And Carablast does hunt after Shelmet. Both of them actually do make sense to see here, as ticks and snails would love a habitat like this, a swampy marsh. Because yeah, if you walk through a swamp, you better get ready to be covered in at least a ton of ticks. In hordes, we can fill out some of the diets as we get Bellsprout, who still eats insects, Ekans, who it's a snake. You use your imagination. But we still can't even get to our new Pokemon just yet, as through surfing and fishing, we get Stunfisk, just waiting in the deep swamp to be stepped on so it can eat its next meal. If the meal is too large, Stunfisk is just gonna flap away. Literally, just like fly or flap itself away. Otherwise, it's gonna shock it and then consume it. Poliwag, eating moss, at least in this area, and then Barboach primarily being a scavenger, but eating whatever it can as it tastes the world around it with its feelers. But then we finally get to land on the slug of the swamp, Goomy. On top of its head are two pairs of antenna-like horns. The hind pair is longer than the front pair. These sensitive horns are used to check its surroundings. Goomy is considered the weakest dragon-type Pokemon. Its body is mostly water and is covered by a germ-laden mucus membrane. This slimy layer causes physical attacks to slide off harmlessly. However, it becomes unable to breathe and will die if its body dries out. Because of this, it stays in damp, shady areas. Hence, we have our swamp here. Goomy's horns have powerful sensors that allow it to locate any sign of the enemy, allowing it to survive any kind of danger. As seen in the anime, its diet consists of leaves. Thank you, Pokemon, for making that clear once more, though I don't think this means it will be attacking the Bellsprout line anytime soon, due to its apparent weaker nature. This route is honestly just everyone eating bugs and then Quagsire, feeding on whatever is dumb enough to fall inside of its mouth with minimal effort. So, nothing too extravagant to explain here when it's all fairly straightforward. Route 15. This path became a popular hangout for the wild and directionless youths of Lumio City. While we don't have any Kalos Pokemon here yet again, sad, we do have some interesting first-time interactions. Scorpy returns. Mightyena here is a strong and intelligent hunter who is going after anything made of meat. Opportunistic predators, not all that different from cats in that matter. Then we have Watchog, who is also going after insects, so Scorpy is having a worse and worse time here. Luckily, Watchog will also go after seeds and other plants. Then we add in Liepard, who is a cat, once again, obligate carnivore, and also a trickster one at that. Fungus, who is going to draw in anyone who eats mushrooms and attempts to eat them instead. Poniard, being a carnivore that'll go for the backs of your knees to immobilize you, then devour you. Klefki, eating the metal ions, originally living within mines until they couldn't find metal in there anymore. And then we get hordes of Murkrow, which will be eating small mammals, bugs, seeds, berries, you name it. A little bit more than what your normal crows will do, because they do have stronger beaks than normal crows. Then when we look at the water, we see Lombre, who will compete with birds for food, and considering its beak, I would dare say it's eating seeds if it isn't just photosynthesizing. Fultil eating what a normal otter eats, small mammals, but then you get a lot of seafood in there, and now we can finally start considering everything found in the water as they are all within the level range of our grass Pokemon. Poliwag is back, probs eating seaweed as well now until it does evolve into Poliwhirl and taking trips on land to eat a few bugs. It has a mixed diet considering it isn't fully evolved, so I kind of consider it that middle stage between tadpole and frog, meaning it isn't an obligate carnivore just yet. But then we add in the Basculin line, well, the one Basculin and its two types, which are vicious creatures that will eat everything in their path, including the other types of Basculin with very few exceptions. That explains why Poliwag evolved, but what about the others? Well, the Basculin likely forced the evolution of Lotad and Weasel, so that's why they aren't here at all. We only get Watchog likely because Patrat couldn't keep up with being hunted down by multiple predators such as Liepard and Mityena, and of course, they don't have their pre-evolved forms because they would be attacking each other and their young constantly, putting a lot of pressure throughout all of the Pokemon in this area and forcing everybody to be on that more evolutionary route. The Lost Hotel. This once famous hotel clings to the shade of its former glory after tragedy left it in ruins. Now again, because this is an abandoned hotel, we can consider it as part of our ecology analysis. Magneton and Electrode consume electricity, whatever little bit is left here I do suppose, unless they're going after each other a little bit. Litwick is consuming the souls of anyone that thinks that the little candle will guide them through the hotel. Poniard is back alongside Klefki, which the hotel being here explains why Klefki is here, all because there are probably a bunch of keys likely left behind that are easy metal ions for it to consume. In addition, it may have been a Pokemon that was being used within the hotel to keep important keys safe as per its lore. Trubbish is eating trash, but now we actually have Garbodor and Rotom. Garbodor is able to spray poisonous gas and filth from its fingertips, but only from its right hand. The toxic liquid from its right arm is so virulent, it can kill a weakened foe instantly. If that filth is blocked, its arm could swell up, causing it considerable pain and discomfort. It can also finish off opponents by belting them with its left arm and spewing an awful smelling toxic gas from its mouth. Garbodor prefers to live in unsanitary places, such as garbage dumps, where it devours garbage in order to grow larger. Consuming garbage also allows Garbodor to crave poisons in its body, the type of which depends on the kind of garbage eaten. Alola was once home to many Garbodor, but the population shrank precipitously after Alolan Grimer and Muck, which prey on Garbodor, were introduced to its habitat. This is said to have made the remaining Garbodor population stronger than its counterparts from other regions. And yes, I know we're not in Alola, but I do believe it is always important to consider all information, because if we did end up with a Grimer or Muck here, which we don't have, we would have those conflicts and attacking positions between each other. Also, it's still eating trash, but it is a heck of a lot more dangerous. It also shows us that this place is actually incredibly unsanitary. not just falling apart. Also, we can now talk about Rotom, which in its base form, Rotom cannot be touched by anyone without the latter being shocked in the process. According to the Rotom catalog, Rotom in its base form is possessing a light bulb. Rotom lack any sort of circulatory system or pulse. Rotom have the ability to enter and control appliances. They typically use their abilities to make mischief, often using the household items they possess to pull pranks on unsuspecting people. Despite this, some Rotom have taken to inhabiting electronics with the intent of helping others. The Rotom Pokédex, Rotom Phones, Rotomi, and Drone Rotom are some examples. Additionally, in Galar, the Rotom Phone is used to power the Rotom Bike. Some of these forms allow Rotom to speak human languages and demonstrate that Rotom is highly intelligent, or all of them in general are highly intelligent. They tend to reside in abandoned buildings, hence why they're here, and research continues on Rotom and its ability to power unique motors. In the Pokemon series episode Rotom's Wish, a specific Rotom was shown to have the ability to time travel. That one gets really messy, and I've been contemplating a time travel video to just talk about all the different time travel stuff that goes on in the games, in the anime, everything, because it gets wild. Also, because it is the Plasma Pokemon, I will make the bet that Rotom doesn't need to eat and ambiently absorbs electrons from the atmosphere to fuel itself. There really isn't much of an ecosystem here, but we at least got to discuss some of those Pokemon, since we will probably never get the chance again in a natural environment. Route 16. This rustic path beside the glittering metropolis of Lumio City is a well-known fishing spot. We don't really have anything new here in comparison to previous routes, but we will at least discuss two new ghost-type Pokemon found here, Phantump and Pumpkaboo. On Phantump, there are two small green leaves near the tip of each branch. Brewing these leaves can create a curative liquid. Phantump is created when a spirit possesses a tree stump. It is said that the spirit is that of a child who became lost in the forest and died. This Pokemon's cries sound like the voice of a child or eerie screams. People have become lost following the voice, but Phantump is just attempting to make friends. Look, just adopt Phantump. Don't catch them in a Pokeball, fill out the paperwork, adopt them. It's always weird to think about catching them. I'd rather it be something along the lines of, I don't know, a Pokemon Ranger. Just make friends with them. I don't know. Joking aside though, Phantump doesn't eat anything, and Trevenant is the same as we look at their information. They're really just spirits of the forest in the end. But, oh boy, we know Pumpkaboo is a little bit of a menace. Pumpkaboo becomes active after dark. The holes in its body can glow and illuminates the way for travelers in the dark. It is said that it also carries wandering spirits to the afterlife by storing the spirits in its body. However, its own spirit is trapped in this world. Pumpkaboo can hypnotize and control any humans or Pokemon. It does this task by releasing streams of light from the holes in the pumpkin. The size of Pumpkaboo is said to be the product of the number of lost souls that lingered in the area where it was formed. When taking spirits to the afterlife, small Pumpkaboo prefer the spirits of children to those of adults. Super-sized Pumpkaboo are very partial to the spirits of people who were of similarly superior proportions. Meaning, Pumpkaboo will eat your soul, it will eat your pet's souls, and it will hypnotize everyone so that way they can take you without a fight. At least in Pumpkaboo's case, other Pokemon may not try to eat them, but it might lose its pumpkin to a Pokemon looking for a snack, which maybe Murkrow might be the Pokemon to do so and cull the herds. Route 17. Due to constant snowstorms and heavy snowfall, humans have no hope of traversing this road on foot. That's where we get to ride our Mamoswine, and it's super great, and I love it. It makes me happy. Anywho, 4 Pokemon, all of whom we have seen before. Sneasel, stealing eggs and ganging up on any Pokemon made of meat. Delibird, being an omnivore and eating whatever it can get its hands on. And then Snover and Abomasnow photosynthesizing until someone tries to take Snover's berries. Then Abomasnow lays down the law and erases them from existence. Which, yeah, Snover was likely being targeted by our other 2 Pokemon here, explaining the evolution. Frost Cavern. The drifting snow and impenetrable fog makes this cavern a place of fantastical illusions. I'm honestly going to save you the time and my own, since this is definitely a route that has most of the same exact Pokemon as other routes in other games, except we throw in Cubchoo and Beartick, which will aggressively freeze and then rip apart any prey that they come across, more specifically Beartick for that matter. If you haven't noticed, and this is something I didn't write into my script, I was deciding whether or not I say it, but a lot of Kalos has a lot of Pokemon from the past games. I believe, if I remember correctly, it has the least new Pokemon added to it if you don't include the Mega Pokemon, which makes the ecology of this a little bit of I don't want to say a bummer, because we've had some really good areas that are really cool to discuss, but otherwise it's a lot of the old encounters and the old Pokemon in similar enough environments that are at least consistent. It feels like Kalos has been more of a, I don't know, it feels more like a peer review of sorts, you know, where you look at something and you're like, okay, I have all these claims, I have all this evidence that says this Pokemon has this diet. Does it hold true through the new generations? And luckily, we have had to do very little adjustments to ensure that we actually have the right information and the right conclusions drawn from past situations. So again, it's nice, but let's continue and we will see some more of these special interactions at least. Route 18. This path is best known for its trolley, once used for the coal mine, and the curious inverse battle house. While again, we have seen every Pokemon here before, I will say this selection here does make it interesting. Returning, we have Graveler, Sandslash, which is going to eat insects, eggs, snakes, and small mammals, Pupitar, who is eating nothing except it's just thrashing about, causing earthquakes, Lairon being territorial and devouring iron, maybe other rock and steel type Pokemon, Torkoal, who literally only eats coal, Girder being an herbivore and lifting I-beams, Heatmor eating insects and steel types, but adapted specifically to eat Durant, and oh look at that, Durant is here, and they only eat plants. More specifically, they prefer to really only eat leaves. Geodude only occur in horde encounters as they eat rocks, and then Shuckle will only appear if you smash rocks. They just ferment berries and then they drink it once it's fermented. There are red flowers here, and we do see Sandslash, Pupitar, and Lairon encounters increase within them, while Torkoal and Girder decrease. I'm not honestly entirely sure why this is the case, because it's not camouflage and it's not the Pokemon that eat vegetation, so it is a little bit odd. I don't know if anyone else could figure that one out, but I could not find even the smallest of detail. Honestly, the entire route is a little bit odd. I'd be willing to bet that Heatmor might be taking a shot trying to eat Lairon on occasion because of the carapace that it does have, not actually being their body, but literally an armored shell, which would explain why we don't see Aeron here. Sandshrew had to evolve into Sandslash in order to take on Durant and compete with Heatmor. Pupitar exists, just in general, and so does Torkoal for that matter, both fairly peacefully. Girder's training here, and then Graveler just has trouble because of Lairon if it has any iron inside of its body. Again, nothing crazy, but a little bit interesting to at least note. Though as we move into Terminus Cave, a coal mine that was closed a few years ago due to rumors of a monster living deep within it, we actually get to see where these Pokemon come from. Pretty much the same encounters as Route 18, of course, except we remove Heatmor and Torkoal, which is a little odd because it is the coal mine. There assumedly is probably some coal outside that Torkoal can take advantage of, and maybe they don't want to enter and deal with what's inside. We do add in Larvitar and Aeron through their horde encounters, which explains where they are coming from. Aeron still eats iron and iron ore, and Larvitar is a dirt eater, just like our grandparents when they were little, strong immune systems and all that. Although, from this ceiling, you will be terrified, because not only do we have Noibat, who is, you know, eating fruit primarily, maybe some insects, but no, the real terror is the fact that there is a roughly 80% chance that whenever something drops down from the ceiling, it is an Ariados slamming down on top of you. And yes, they will eat anything that comes their way that isn't a plant. So, no thank you, I don't need to enter that cave ever. No wonder they call it Terminus Cave. Your life will be terminated. Route 19. This great valley can now be crossed thanks to its long bridge built with the help of many Pokemon. First up, we're going to talk about all of our returning Pokemon that we've actually seen in our swamp before. We talk about our new Pokemon. On land, Weepinbell, Haunter, Quagsire, Carnivine, Carablast, Shelmet, Stunfisk, and then in the water, Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Barnboat. Pokemon from past editions we throw in are Politoed, who, since it is based on the Koki frog, who eats arthropods, such as insects, crustaceans, and arachnids. Politoed will follow the same idea. Whiscash, who will literally eat anything that gets close enough to it in the water. Arbok, who, again, snake. Gonna eat eggs and mammals, maybe whatever else comes by it that isn't a plant if necessary. Gligar, eating bugs and small mammals despite its scorpion fly inspiration, only eating fruit. Then another duo of Pokemon we haven't talked about before, Drapion and Sliggoo. Drapion has 4 segmented legs with pointed toes. Its most distinguishing feature is its huge claws. It can turn its head 180 degrees. That is terrifying. Imagine thinking that you're gonna get away from this thing, and it just full-on owl turns its head to look at you. It's a big Pokemon, and very aggressive, which it literally states. Drapion is a very aggressive Pokemon, attacking anything that enters its territory. It primarily lives in deserts and otherwise rocky environments. Drapion has a sturdy build and takes pride in its strength, being able to take down foes even without the use of its deadly toxin. Drapion has enough power to easily scrap a car, while its hard, armor-like skin can deflect sword strikes. Due to its vicious nature and brutish temperament, it's known as the Sand Demon, but is known to avoid fights with Hippowdon. Drapion tends to go on rampages and causes havoc on everything in its way. Easy to assume that it is eating everything in its path then. Well, anything that isn't a plant, since scorpions don't eat plants, and it was derived from scorpion. For Sliggoo, its gelatinous body forms a spiral shell-like structure on its back. Contained within the shell are its brain, heart, and other organs. I had to double check the visual for it, because I never imagined Sliggoo with a shell, and it just has that tiny little bump on its back, which is technically a shell according to Pokemon, so yeah, all the vital organs are sitting right there on its back. Doesn't seem like a great place to contain it, seems very obvious, and hard to protect, but whatever. Sliggoo excretes and coats its body with sticky mucus that can dissolve anything. Because it lacks teeth, it sprays this liquid onto prey and slurps them up once they are dissolved. Since its slime can melt through anything, predators stay far away from it. Its eyes have devolved, causing it to go blind. This makes it difficult for it to tell allies from prey, and it will sometimes attempt to melt its companions. Do not, I repeat, do not give Sliggoo a hug. You will die. And since it's acidic, that's not gonna feel good. That's gonna be a tortured death. Its 4 horns act as a radar system and are used to detect sounds and smells. Sliggoo only cares about food and will flee from its enemies whenever possible. So cool. A friend Pokemon that's gonna likely melt me by accident. Everything I ever wanted. This doesn't really tell us what it eats though. Goodra also doesn't state its diet. And we now know that it kinda hunts after Pokemon. So unlike Gumi, it's likely not just eating grass or leaves or whatever it said it's eating. You see leaves. So we can look at slugs to figure that out, which turns out that they can be herbivores, carnivores, detrivores, or just generally omnivores. Should have seen that coming with such a broad spectrum of a creature. But apparently the carnivorous ones will eat pretty much anything that they can, even each other. Not to say there's many options for them considering their size and not being very combative, which explains why Gumi is the way that it is, but that also means that as this Pokemon grows, it is likely eating anything that it can, being truly opportunistic, especially since it is effectively blind until it turns into Goodra. I would even be willing to bet that Sliggoo is just eating bugs and Poliwag then, the ones that would be effectively about the same size and not too difficult to hunt down. In all reality, this route is just slugs, bugs, and bug eaters, and Haunter, I suppose. That's why we see Scorpy evolved. Quagsire is already here, which explains why we don't see Ekans. Carnivine is a glutton, so any first form Pokemon are in trouble anyhow if they can't fight back, and then Drapion comes in and will just destroy everything that it can in its path, whether it is successful or not, being a miniature reset button, since there's no Hippowdon to stop it. Route 20. This path was designed to disturb the woods as little as possible, so it twists and turns among the trees. I can say this now. This was done not for the protection of Pokemon, but for the protection of humans because of what lies within this forest. Jigglypuff appears, not being the threat, Less so around the red flowers as well, by the way, eating berries or somehow filter feeding since it doesn't really have organs. I at least assume it doesn't have organs because its body, Wigglytuff, can kind of just inflate to incredible sizes and doesn't seem to have any problem with that at all. No damage or anything, and I cannot imagine that it would actually have organs at that point, so maybe it just doesn't actually eat. Noctowl is a carnivore, as owls will be, and it is often not found within the flowers. Gothorita is wandering around here eating berries and loves being around the red flowers. Amoonguss is waiting for anyone that will come near it so it can attack and consume them. In the meantime, it is a normal mushroom decomposer. Sudowoodo exists in horde encounters. Honestly, my past theory is that they use their green orbs that they have to, like a mortar and pestle, scrape up minerals from other rocks, but that's as close as we get to it really having a diet at all. Otherwise, it just kind of wicks away any moisture in its body and lives its life. And then there are also fungus in horde encounters, which would be fun to think of them as normal mushrooms growing in clusters or even forming fairy rings. And shockingly, we not only get the new Pokemon in Trevenant, but also in the wild for the first time, Zoroark. Zoroark can create illusions that are indistinguishable from reality, deluding many people simultaneously. It can even create illusory landscapes in the forests where it dwells to hide its territory and protect its den. However, Zoroark is incapable of physically changing itself into another form. It is merely capable of casting illusions. When a Zoroark takes the form of a human, it is capable of human speech. It can make convincing illusions of attacks, and these illusions are extremely realistic, enough to fool even cameras and make one believe they're being physically affected, though the illusion does not have any direct physical effect. Lonely trainers tend to use Zoroark to create illusions in order to ease their own burden of solitude. There are stories of Zoroark punishing people who tried to capture it with illusions. Zoroark live in groups where unity is strong. It is extremely protective of those it cares about and will go to any lengths to keep them safe, including risking its own life. And it can hold grudges against those who harm its loved ones. Zoroark will hide its Zora young in its mane to protect them and carry them around. And of course, since it is a fox, it is eating rabbits, rodents, birds, frogs, earthworms, carrion berries, fruit, maybe some sticks, you name it. Omnivore, diet, thank you, woodland, trust. Once again though, we'll actually wait to discuss how they impact this area because we have another very special case scenario in this route. Trevenant can control other trees by using its roots as a nervous system. It uses this ability to trap people who harm its forest and will curse people who cut down trees. However, it is very kind to forest-dwelling creatures and Pokemon that reside within its body. Trevenant hates fire-type Pokemon, so lumberjacks usually bring them in to repel it. It is often even believed that Trevenant has consumed people, although it is unclear whether this is fact or rumor. I'm saying it is a rumor. I've said it 100 times. The lumberjacks are no better than Gaston from Disney. But as long as you aren't a fire type, or at least a destructive fire type, then you're fine around Trevenant. Also, don't destroy its forest. Respect its forest. It also seems to really like the red flowers here, as it doubles in encounter rates within those flowers, which we could look at other Pokemon such as Gothorita, who also appears more often in those flowers to show that they are at least very friendly with each other. So, I would argue, this route is very similar to our routes with the Gravestones, a controlled route that is a bit more peaceful. Trevenant is going to keep the peace. It's why there are no fire types. In addition, the only obligate carnivore here is actually Noctowl. Otherwise, everyone else has a more flexible diet. Why would that be, you may ask? Well, you need something to control the population of other Pokemon here within the ecosystem. Your ecosystem will not function well without proper predators or other external factors that will kill members of species. Not wipe them out, just take away the sick ones, the elderly. Think of it like deer or mice. They reproduce fast, they spread around quickly, and they have a lot of predators. This is because with their species, they will continue to eat and grow in population as any other species will. The problem with this is that if one gets, let's say, chronic wasting disease, then it's going to spread like wildfire, and then all of the deer are more likely to get the disease, which can spread from deer to other animals. Heck, there are honestly a lot of different diseases that some animals carry that do not affect them, but then it can transfer to another animal and destroy their body. So, Noctowl, being an intelligent Pokemon, serves as a Pokemon that will keep the numbers in check without taking more than what is necessary, which works perfectly for our Forest Guardian Trevenant. It's also important or interesting to note that Gothorita is here, a psychic, not just in the power sense or the typing sense, but also in the tell the future sense, intelligence. Its evolved form straight up gets depressed because it knows all life will stop one day, it will lose its trainer, and it is inevitable. So, it would make sense that Gothorita is acting like a guide of sorts, helping, tell Trevenant, hey, you can't keep everyone alive forever. It actually would hurt more people if you did that. And so Trevenant keeps Pokemon such as Noctowl, Zoroark, and Amoonguss around. An obligate carnivore, a rare but powerful omnivore, and a decomposer they may hunt here and there. Also, it's important to note that Zoroark is also helping protect the forest, and it doesn't really have to worry too much about the other Pokemon trying to attack its young. So this is a great little place for it to be, because humans aren't going to be running around. Humans have already decided, oh, we should really be careful here. Let's create a winding path that is going to disturb the forest as little as possible by going through areas that may not have a lot of vegetation, areas that things aren't growing, so that way we're making as little of an impact on it as possible. The rest of our Pokemon here are essentially prey species, except Sudowoodo, who's kind of an oddball. And of course, we as humans do have to watch our back because we are not seen in a positive light by Zoroark and Trevenant. Otherwise, it's actually a really cool, secluded little forest that is self-sustaining. Pokemon Village. Legends say a place exists where Pokemon live in hiding, but no one has ever found it. Now, all the creatures here are from our old route, plus add in all the water Pokemon we've talked about before, except the Barboach, Line, Luvdisc, and Politoed. Though we do add in Garbodor and Banette within daily trash cans, which is pretty sad when you think about Banette. And just for posterity, Banette doesn't eat anything. It has all the energy it needs inside of its body. The only one I was not ready to see here was our ecological outlier, Ditto, who loves the yellow flowers more than the purple flowers for some reason. It's not a Pokemon that gets hunted by other Pokemon because it can't just become any other Pokemon it sees or has seen. It can photosynthesize by becoming a grass-type Pokemon. It is fairly conflict avoidance except with its own kind, in which case it just results in a transform of, oh, I can transform faster and better than you. Whatever. I'm gonna stop. I love Ditto so much, but in the ecological sense, it gives me a little bit of an aneurysm. They hurt me. So let's just move on to the next route, shall we? Route 21. This is the Path of the Chosen, designed to hone the stalwart trainers who dare face the Pokemon League. Scyther, who is hunting any Pokemon it can defeat. Ursaring, eating mainly berries but will throw down a Pokemon to eat some meat. Spinda, eating berries as it waddles around drunkenly. Floatzel is back, so is Lombre, Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Basculin, and then we get some oldie hits, such as Dratini, who is a bottom-feeding Pokemon, and Dragonair, who we can suspect doesn't eat or may eat some fish. And finally, not only do we get the Seed Eater Swablu in a horde, but we also get Altaria, who we never fully covered before. This Pokemon uses its wings to catch updrafts and soar across the sky calmly and gracefully. It gracefully glides through the clouds, often while singing or humming in a soprano tone. Its voice seems to have a special property that induces dreamy states for listeners. Altaria can be very affectionate, enveloping people it has bonded with in its cotton-like wings. While normally kind, it can attack foes with shrill cries without mercy if provoked. As shown in the Pokemon The Horizon series episode Lyco and Amethio. Amethio? Yeah. Altaria's beak is strong enough to shatter boulders. According to Solana, in Ruby and Sapphire episode Pokemon Ranger Deoxys Crisis, Altaria uses geomagnetic fields to navigate their flight, and any disturbances can affect their sense of direction. This is actually not entirely out of the norm or completely unheard of when it comes to a number of animals. Altaria is often found living in forests, though it also inhabits mountain ranges, and has been shown to enjoy water in both the animated series and the TCG. Although if its wings are exposed to too much of it, they lose their fluffiness, revealing their actual anatomy. They look like rubber chickens, just to make that nice and simple. As mentioned in the sleep-style decks, Altaria is known to sleep while wrapped inside its wings. While sleeping in its soft, beautiful wings, Altaria may be enjoying the most comfortable sleep ever. I remember at one point someone also did point out, or at least mention, I believe it was in a live stream because I could not find the comment anywhere, that they could see Swablu being a normal seed eater and then Altaria becoming more of a hard nutcracker or vice versa at one point, thanks to their change in their beak shape. And I don't want to credit the wrong person, and I don't want to take credit myself, which is why I'm kind of mentioning it here, because I would have otherwise never known, and all I do know is that it makes sense and is genius if that is the case, and I'm all in for it. So I won't paint a full picture here, but I will break down this route because it is interesting to me. Starting with the water, we have Lombre and Floatzel on the surface as we find them when surfing. We know Lombre is vibing, getting raised, maybe even competing with birds over seed and plant matter to eat, as we have discussed before. Floatzel is absolutely waiting for prey, using its flotation device to float at the top of the water as it looks down into the deeps, waiting for it to use its own propeller-like tail to launch at high speeds and eat other fish or creatures that are found here. And the only reason we don't see Buizel here is because the Basculin are far too aggressive, causing all other Pokemon to evolve, especially since they can be found in high numbers everywhere that they are. And Floatzel only exists, or Buizel evolves into Floatzel, simply because they realized they needed to move faster, meaning they don't need to evolve via battling. Again, one day I will cover a video on all the Pokemon that evolve not by leveling up. I have it on my list. It would be very fun to do. Anywho, back to ecology, as Poliwhirl exists because of Poliwag needing to evolve, but not being in extreme danger all the time. Dratini is rare here, though occurring at the same rate as Dragonair, so they really are just biding their time until they evolve. When we move on to land, Poliwhirl isn't there, but that could be because it is getting its fill of Basculin when it can. It also seems more dangerous on land because Floatzel is there instead, which otters occasionally eat small mammals, meaning that Spinda is likely in trouble here, which also explains why Teddiursa isn't here and we just have the mama bear of Ursaring. Scyther being aggressive and attacking whatever it can for food is also enough to make a number of first form Pokemon feel the pressure and evolve in their own right. I would not be surprised if Ursaring had a den nearby and we would find Teddiursa in there, even though they don't appear in hordes in this area. In fact, we can assume Altaria has a nest in this area, or at least is moving with a flock, because of the hordes of Swablu here itself as well. Stumbled that. One last note I found out is that this is the only location with Pokemon X and Y in which a red-striped Basculin can be caught using the Good Rod in Pokemon X and the Super Rod in Pokemon Y. In all other locations in which Basculin can be encountered in these games, blue-striped Basculin appears under those conditions instead. I usually associate the better rods being able to have stronger lures or heavier lures that could drop deeper into the water. So it would be very interesting to find out if maybe, typically, one colored type Basculin may typically prefer deeper waters than the other, which could help explain why, if they are living in the same lake, they don't immediately always rip each other apart fin to fin, because maybe they don't interact with each other as much. Maybe there's a higher and lower layer, and there's just that thin divider that maybe they interact with each other in. Maybe one likes colder water, one likes warmer. The ideas can spout from there, and I will let you take that as you will as we move on. Route 22. This lively path bustles with many trainers and their Pokemon all gathered here to train themselves. Welcome to our weird semi-finale, because this route actually connects to Central Kalos early in the game, so the encounters are going to be a bit different, but they are unique. Psyduck is back alongside Bunnelby and Dunsparce, but then everyone else is from past editions or completely new. And because I can break the rules, we're going to consider everyone here for the fun of it. In the water, we have Bottom Feeder Magikarp and its destructive reset button that eats everything, Gyarados. The aggressive Goldeen and Seaking are here eating other fish and carving holes into rocks for their babies. Carvana are here being a little aggressive, kind of like your movie piranhas, unlike real-life piranhas, and their evolution Sharpedo is the rarest encounter here that will also likely engage with disputes with Gyarados, and I'd like to say very, very far away from those fights. Somehow, Psyduck finds it safe to float atop the water, and Azumarill as well, who will save drowning Pokemon while fishing for food for itself. It becomes clear after we look at the water why it's Azumarill, because Marill and Azurill will not survive these waters with all those aggressive fish. So Azumarill is luckily here to keep other Pokemon safe whenever they venture into the water. Then we have our landlubbers. Farfetch'd is protecting its leeks and any reeds in the area, as it just prefers to eat leeks and reeds. Azurill is doing their best to survive and stay away from anyone who is seeking out their nutrient-rich orb. It, again, really only needs to eat a few scraps here and there for calories since the ball has all the nutrients it needs to evolve. Maybe Azumarill is fishing and helping it survive since it is in the area. Bidoof is also back, but within the yellow flowers, we see Bibarel, who hasn't changed their diet but clearly loves to eat yellow flowers. Riolu is training here, and honestly, because I forgot to mention it before and I was corrected, yes, it is an omnivore, since Lucario do form packs and will actively hunt down other Pokemon in the wild. I've said it before, I'll say it again. One Lucario is scary enough. A pack of Lucario sounds terrifying. What would that be called? Like, I get it. I suppose we could stick to a pack if we want to be boring. But I say we call them a band, because that's what some people call coyotes. Let's just find something fun. I don't know. It's Pokemon. Why not? Anywho, we do get 2 new Pokemon here, with one of them being an evolution of Bunnelby, Diggersby. And then we also get Litleo. Diggersby's remaining limbs are small in comparison to the ears. The fur of the upper paws is white, while the feet are brown. Each paw has 3 digits. A sash or belt-like band composed of thicker, woolly fur surrounds its waist. It tends to tuck its paws into its fur. This fur is known to retain heat exceptionally well and was used by people for heavy winter clothing. This sash is divided into sections, brown on its sides and yellow on the front and back. Its short tail is also yellow and protrudes from the back section of the sash. I never think about its tail. I don't even imagine it with a tail, I'm going to be honest with you. Diggersby's face has a large brown muzzle with prominent cheeks. The coloration around its muzzle extends down onto its neck and resembles beard stubble. It has 2 large upper incisors, 3 whiskers on each cheek, a tiny pink nose, and eyes that appear to perpetually squint. I am reaching the end of this script, and I am dying slowly. So no new diet from Bunnelby, but there is a very good chance with it being in the yellow flowers, it may be not only enjoying them, but also digging out their roots for food, meaning that this will completely destroy the yellow flowers it eats and allow an opening for other vegetation to grow here. That way we don't end up with a monoculture. And if you don't know what a monoculture is, it is just exactly what we talked about earlier with the deer and the mice, but for plants, just to kind of oversimplify it. Litleo is our other here, as I have stated, who is a hot-blooded Pokemon that is curious by nature and is quick to start fights. In battle, its short mane radiates heat. The stronger its opponent, the more heat it produces. Litleo live in prides, where they are raised and taught to hunt by female Pyroar. When a wild Litleo is capable of hunting on its own, it is kicked out of the pride and begins to live alone. It lives in grassy plains and along cliff sides. And yes, the male lions don't actually do that much in the pride. It is really the female lions that really go out there, do a lot of the hunting, kick a lot of the butt. So, funnily enough, Litleo is likely trying to hunt down many of the Pokemon we have here. We do find all of the first 4 Pokemon in the grass, and then most of their evolutions in the yellow flowers or in the water, depending on which ones it is, as though they were just watching over their children, or this is supposed to be a safe place for them to be, or the children are just playing in an open field. And all of the land-based Pokemon can be fairly peaceful, with the exception to the rare Riolu and the more common Litleo coming to take a meal. The water itself is the most dangerous part, honestly, as anyone going near it might get their faces ripped off by a Carvana or a Goldeen on a bad day. Victory Road. This treacherous path to the Pokemon League will break the hearts of even the toughest trainers. I have some bad news to break to you. This is the 3rd game in a row where the Victory Road is unimpressive, and it just does not have an interesting ecology for me to break down. So, because I can break my own rules for the sake of fun and entertainment, after we discuss some of the new Pokemon here, we will talk about the primary 3 legendary Pokemon and how they have affected the ecosystem, even though they are not necessarily naturally occurring and often are just in hiding in their cocoons or split apart the entire world. I would have talked about the Megas, but I already have a video on that, even though I accidentally left out the menace that is Metagross. And as much as I wanted to make an argument for the Megas, because it's Kalos, I wanted it so badly, there's not much to say. They're really not impacting the environment all that much outside of maybe Mega Tyranitar constantly shooting sand out of its back, for example. Other than that, though, it's like, where would they exist? Even if they did, they're not making enough of an impact before their bodies just revert to normal or break down depending on, you know, the type of Pokemon that they are, because it's Mega Evolution and it can be pretty bad for their body. Either way, let's move on to Victory Road and the Pokemon here. We have a lot of repeat customers, being Geodude, Graveler, Haunter, Girder, Floatzel, Noibat, Lombre, Poliwag, Poliwhirl, both Basculin, Shuckle, Ariados, we throw in Poliwrath, who will bop those fish as we know that they are fully formed, and an obligate carnivore frog, meaning that they're probably also going to eat some insects, of course, as well. And then we add in some oldies and some terrifying newbies. Lickitung, who is primarily, actually I believe, only eating insects, only eating other Pokemon if absolutely necessary. Fearow, who is primarily a carrion bird, but is hunting after other meaty Pokemon of all kinds. Skarmory, who is also a bit of a carrion, but is definitely a rarer and stronger competition, going after the small and maybe some larger mammals. Druddigon, who is aggressively carnivorous. And for the first time, we not only get Zweilous, but also Hydreigon. And I will say, we already know that Dino is an opportunistic omnivore, stating that it literally eats anything, but let's round out this species because this is probably the only time we will ever get this opportunity. Zweilous has the vigor and energy to eat and bite constantly without stopping. I feel that energy. My stomach is a black hole. Its heads dislike each other and are very hostile. If neither head is given equal attention by someone, they will fight out of envy. Each head has their own likes and dislikes. As a result, the heads often turn eating into a competition, each head trying to claim leadership by eating more than the other. Because of this, Zweilous always eats far too much and is covered in scars, even without opponents to fight. Are you telling me that they're accidentally biting each other constantly? That's kind of funny. This, though, allows Zweilous to become stronger without any allies helping it. It is a nomadic Pokemon. It migrates once it has eaten all the prey in an area, its two heads arguing over directions. However, Zweilous generally makes its habitat in caves. It moves on once it eats everything in an area. That is horrifying for an ecology standard. Everything being wiped out. A desolate land. Do you know what that could do? Not just like Pokemon being removed from the area, but let's say it is removing plants, seeds, anything. Even if you just remove grass from an area, grass holds dirt down, and the winds of change will come in, blowing through the soil and quote-unquote turn it into nothing but sand, as it all grates down to basically nothing, and nothing will be able to grow in that area very easily whatsoever unless they have strong, fast-growing roots. This is a destructive force, and it gets even worse with Hydreigon, who is a violent, destructive Pokemon. It will attack anything that moves, determining it a foe. However, in the Pokemon the Series Black and White episode, Cameron's Secret Weapon, Hydreigon is depicted as fairly obedient when around its trainer. The three heads take turns when attacking, not stopping until their target is defeated. Hydreigon can also use its three mouths to rapidly eat through anything. Despite its three heads, it is a singular entity. Unlike its pre-evolved form Zweilous, its secondary heads lack brains and do not move or think of their own accord. The little Muppet hands. I got the little guy right back there. Little Muppet hands over there. Conversely, with its central head housing its brain, Hydreigon is said to be highly intelligent in spite of its constantly destructive thoughts. So, great. Not only is it incredibly powerful, it is highly intelligent as well, knowing exactly how to destroy everything just right. Hydreigon lives high up in the air and has been known to ambush opponents from above. Many stories described Hydreigon destroying entire villages. However, Hydreigon is afraid of Noivern during nighttime. It is said its reason for being ferocious is due to ancient people loathing it. The ancient people believed Hydreigon was evil incarnate, hence always attacking it. You know what? You know what just came to mind? Zora was knocked out of villages, forced out, and it died in the wild, right? So it became a ghost type, it got its grudge and Hisui, so on and so forth. It follows the idea of the Kitsune and the legends behind it, which is really cool. Give me the opposite of that, but with Hydreigon and the Dino line, so on and so forth, right? Imagine it having a more benevolent nature. Give us another dragon fairy type. Give us, I don't know, something else. Give us that rehabilitation or that species that never got absolutely just ignored and mistreated, thus changing its entire behavior and potentially changing its typing for that matter. I would love that. But as we get back into its diet, its yokai inspirations includes the Yamato no Orochi, which is also an omnivore in the most literal of sense. And its shiny coloration even matches the yokai's description in some stories. So that's just a really cool little detail to just reinforce the idea that Hydreigon literally eats everything that it can. Well, let's move on from this route and dig into those legendaries, our representations of life, death, and ecology itself. You thought I could pass up talking about my boy Zygarde? You thought wrong. I am Mr. Ecology Man. I know I do other stuff now, but I'm Mr. Ecology Man. And because I'm so confident, I may regret this later, but because I'm so confident in my ability to talk about the three of them, I'm going to recount this from memory, okay? So here we go. Xerneas is our rainbow deer, the representation of life itself, and is known to be able to grant eternal life to those that it deems so. This is what we see when its energy is used in the first firing of the the ultimate weapon, which gave Eternal Floette not only life once more, but eternal life. The radiation from that energy likely also steeped into AZ himself, which is why he has quote-unquote eternal life as well. Xerneas is also pairing up with Yveltal, the only one that can actually calm it down. In addition to this, when Xerneas has all this energy, is using it, is able to grant life, is able to grow grass and foliage and everything within areas all over the place, literally granting life to everything around it, and it runs out of energy, it basically just turns into its cocoon, which is just a tree by all means, a protective form for itself as it rests in a dormant state until it gathers enough energy for it to come out again, or when it is forced to exit this state once more. Before we go into that further, to explain Yveltal for that matter, Yveltal is the embodiment of death. Everything has to come to an end. We've talked about this before so many times through ecology. You can't just have everything live forever. Resources are limited, and unfortunately, as much as I don't like agreeing with the villain, Lysander wasn't wrong in those ideas. He was correct in the idea of, yes, everything will run out. There are limited resources, and people keep taking and taking and taking, and if they do so without regards to others or the fact that these are limited resources, then everything will die. And then, of course, he decided to make some pretty bad decisions. Now, with Yveltal being the embodiment of death, it is able to take life energy, or in fact, infinity/bioenergy from Pokemon, which turns them into stone. This is something that we actually see with AZ and the ultimate weapon once more, as all the Pokemon used with the ultimate weapon turned to stone. That is also why we see so many of those grave sites in that past route. That is assumedly where all those Pokemon were laid to rest after their energy was taken and harnessed into that destructive energy that was then fired for the second time with the ultimate weapon. So again, first firing was for life, second firing was for death. A balancing of sorts between it all. Yveltal itself will also turn into its cocoon form when it is out of energy or anything along those lines, wanting to enter its dormant state, though it is said that when it does exit that dormant state and use its ability Oblivion Wings, it can just and your life energy will be gone. You basically die instantly. Again, embodiment of death. Not the Grim Reaper, no, literal death itself. There is a big difference between the two. So we have this balancing of life in Xerneas, death in Yveltal, and what does that come out to? If you don't have the proper balance of it, then the world will turn to ruin. Disease runs rampant, resources are overused, maybe too many people die, and then all the species, all plants, all Pokemon, all people will come to an end because too much was taken. You need that balance. And ultimately, that's when one of my favorite Pokemon of all time comes in, Zygarde. You have the Zygarde cores. There's, in the games, there's only, I believe, 5 of them. But then you have the Zygarde cells as well. All of these are invisible throughout the entire world. They're basically, at least these cells, are acting as these little spy cams, I want to say, for the entire world, waiting for their moment to notice that something is out of the norm, that something is wrong, that something needs to be resolved. They report in, the cores call everybody in, and they can move incredibly fast at light speeds throughout the entire world, collecting and forming their 10%, 50%, or complete Zygarde forms. 10% being our doggy. The dog Zygarde is essentially our Pokemon that is our scout, appearing in emergencies, running fast, zooming, doing what it needs to do. 50% form is ruthless. It is going to try and attack and destroy whatever is in its way and put an end to things before it gets worse. You can have actually a 50% and a 20%. Technically, you could have, I believe, no, you can only have one 20% and one 50% because you need a certain number of cores per percentile in order to keep it actually stable. Then, when it gets to a 100% form, appearing only when there is something that is catastrophic in terms of something that will destroy and offset nature and ecology in its entirety, that is when our 100% complete Zygarde appears. It will erase whatever it is out of existence. It will be aggressive in doing so, and it will fight until it cannot fight anymore. Not only did it fight the Ultra Beasts in the manga, it also fought against, in the anime, Lysander's own creation of Zygarde, that he wanted to go ahead and absorb the real Zygarde and become something far more powerful so that way he could continue his own plans. Zygarde is balanced, and its own ability flat out destroys or eliminates the abilities of Xerneas and Yveltal. It balances them out, allowing it, if they're ever put under the control of somebody else, again, like Lysander tried to do, to put them down for bed, send them away, just like Rayquaza does for Groudon and Kyogre, and put up the dukes. And he puts up, or it puts up those dukes hard. We're pretty sure that it speared Lysander and the rock and killed them both. And then afterwards, it breaks down, sends its cells all over the place, and waits for the next time that it has to be called in to save the world. It's very interesting to think that it doesn't come in to help with the Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza situation, mainly because it probably knows Rayquaza has it handled. And we don't know the limit to the cells. We are just told they're all over the place. There could be more cores. There could be more cells than we could ever imagine. All we know is that they're all over the world, and they're here to keep the balance. And it is often regarded as a creature that draws its power from that balance, from the need of the earth itself. And I love it. Easily a top 5 Pokemon at this point, after learning so much about it, and I cannot help but gush so much about this lovely, lovely legendary Pokemon. I'm not even going to check and see what I got correct, and, if I missed anything. I'm 99% sure I got all of that correct. If I missed anything, you are absolutely free to make fun of me in the comments for messing up something I am so absolutely overconfident about. But with that, the Kalos ecosystem is complete. I didn't expect it to be this short. Alola would be next, so if you do want to see more of the ecosystem stuff, get this to really high views, because the faster it gets to those high views, the more I'm encouraged to then spend my time creating a sequel to something that already exists, or a next part, or anything like that. And I would love to cover Alola. I would love to cover Alola. It's one of my favorite regions, so I will be incredibly excited. And we have a lot of new Pokemon there, including the Totem Pokemon, which could have huge ecological implications with them. Ultimately, just go help give more watch time. Comments the most surprising part to this, as watch time and comments is basically what YouTube looks for. Don't spam the comments, of course. But before you go, if you did enjoy this, please make sure you subscribe, share this video with others, or even become a member for as little as $3 a month, as it goes a long way to help the channel. And you get not only a bunch of different perks, you also get a nice little shout out every single video for as long as you are a member in the credits. Speaking of, it's time to shout out all of our members. So yeah, I realized before we actually get started that this room is not made for a green screen. I cannot make it go high enough, and within a light range, it's going to take a lot more work, but I'll worry about that in the future, as right now we have all of our members, starting with the Gods of Hope, Biggins, Heals for Life, and Vatty Lemon, our champions, Andrew Murch, Elizabeth Lovacott, Biggins, Nias Costa, then our Knights of the Court, Dylan Perrine, Crumbo, Vatty Lemon, Double Plow, Annie Stone, Allen, and Heals for Life. Don't forget Warren Hemphill, followed up by all of our Wanderers, Beast Lord, Max Supreme, Noisy Bones, Mysterious Militant, The Music Man, Kilba, BBX, Chris, Solus, Flame Ninja 30, Burnt Toast, Nathan Gressing, Trafo, Undieware, Aries Archives, Brighton Bishop Fan, Meetin' Wolf, Tonico, Casey, Denzel, 1989, Blade Accords, Recious Ivy, Celtic Fox, The Lucky Charms, Reverse Clock, Lydia Marie, Cat Mushroom, JMT Armias, Katsy Lay, Brash Candicoot, Nori, Majin TY, Danny the Rabbas 1, Hadiafa, and Abbas Muhammad, Ruthless Hauser, a Rogue Spartan, Rub X Switch, Cupcakes, Jiro, Xanthar the Anime King, Dragon Gamers, Zenith Thunder the Hunter, Netrexy, Ocean, R, Foxo Wisp, Ninja Dad, Ace Visconti, Domo Arigato, Gulafos, Big Rosie 45 Dylan, Zodiac Senpai, Horse of Amity, Dustron Gaming, For Moms, For City, Space Lazy, Zach Arrowwood, Just Here, the Live R360, the Chin 22, Jack of Frost, Break, Orbit, Captain Absol, Benark, the Cool Guy 22, the Hawaiian Punch, Wet Like Watch, Tyrone Jones, Bluest Gecko, Tree Sub Owl, Matthew Kennedy, T Baggins, Beware, Electro Lucario, Nin, Malachi, Zalmakai, Connor Shaw, Goat, Renee, Grants R, Travis Hinton, Hands, Dream, Adnan Alizade, Elijah Tidwell, Dylan Porpez, Tripola, Redactivism, Oreo, That Darling, Rad Draconvin, 200, Daniel Moody, Ireland, Japanese letters I still can't pronounce, Despair, Riley Pointer, Adrian Petrie, Reese Maru, Death Boy Bandit, Penguin Sage, 29, Ashby Harry, Poke Pro, Mallow, Rexy Young, Illuminati, Salty Eggs, Wrecking Basher 45, Moth the Night, Castle Strong, The Dark Scorpio, The Lawn, Kevlar the Dawn, Miku No Money, D, Snakes on 520, Real Salu, God Sloth, Dink Gaming, Pisha, Mr. Diagonal Yips, DJ Jester, Dry Bowser, J Vocal Covers, Ismail Ahmad, Sexy Bear, The Coolest Guy 22, Jefferson Thompson, Imagine, Medico TH73, Lick Grids, Buzzy, Yo Boy, Oven, Cover, The Great, A Random Person, Number 2, Wussel, Addie C, Adam Sandler, Disporty Yapper, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Ty Rise, Quinn, Water, Rye Smith, Gamer, Hag, Addy Cadabra, Bad Dragonite, King Pie, Just JM, Vanny Samaru, Star, SMD, Haybell Yeet, Micah 626 Gaming, Muse Art World, Telumio, Gwendolyn, Iskander 072, Andrew Frostpeak, Anonymous, Summons, Law, Nuck, Nguyen, Ian Ray, Big and C9, whatever this is, Corner of the Common, Malachi's, Burkhart, Carlisle, and Heather West. Thank you all for being members or receiving gift memberships through the community. If you want to hear your name or see your name on screen as you did with these people, become a member for as little as $3 a month. Become a knight if you want for $7 a month. Or, geez, go become a champion, I do suppose. Outside of that, then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't think what to do, don't think what to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I just realized that I didn't have my professor's coat on that entire time. That's because I had, things that I had to do. Oops.